lean on your experience for, we typically come to a consensus on each department. Is that what we try to do here, or is that how it, or do we just collectively throw our stuff in a pool, send it to the board, or how does it typically work?
That's what I would do.
Yeah, you can do that. Usually we'd only come out with something like this.
One recommendation to put forward.
A whole list of recommendations presented to the board. They'll consider what we've recommended. But if we can go through it, and if there's nothing to change.
Each department, yeah, go through department by department, I guess, real quick.
Oh, thank you. Can I recommend that we eliminate the departments that no one,
I think that'll be our first.
Are there any departments we can just agree with?
We can start with that. Call the meeting to order.
Yeah, I'm gonna call the meeting in order. Looks like we got about information. We do it? Yeah, 5 o'clock, right? Call the meeting in order. Article 1, to consider the 2020-2021 town budget. So I don't know, again, how this is done in the past. I've never sat on it, but I think the best thing to do is just kind of walk through each department, see what we have for recommendations individually. If nobody has any, we could kind of pass that one on and be done with it.
You just remember the order of the packet?
Yeah, we might as well go in order of the packet. In fact, I can grab the newest one. This is the newest packet right here. I don't know if anybody needs a copy of it. Did you get the newest one?
Yeah, 26, I think so.
Do you have? Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah. Governing body expense department 100. Go right through them from the front to the back. I guess would be the easiest way to do it. And we'll leave that open for discussion. If anybody has any recommendations they want to put forth to the committee, see if we can come on a consensus for this particular budget. I have no changes on this one.
You got my sheet?
Ken has one.
Well, I think Ken, it would be like important for you to verbalize with these departments as we go through, so we can discuss
As a group.
whatever, like, if you're gonna propose a change, then propose it, so like everyone else can say yay or nay, or no, I mean.
The town travel expenses, from what I understand, is quite expensive. I'm guessing around $35,000. I think it's out of control.
45.
Huh? No, but the total.
Okay.
The total
All the
Total.
departments. Okay.
is $35,000. Where are we going? That's why I recommend to cut $1,000 off that budget.
So on the governing body, Department 100, you're recommending $1,000 reduction in travel and training. It was at 5,000. They're proposing $3,500 budget this year. It looks like in 2019 they expensed out $2,200. As of June 30th this year, they were expensed out $493. That's the UC. Is that accurate?
My only other comments around legal.
There was an explanation for that.
Okay, so can I stick my nose in here?
Yeah.
I'm trying not to lead too much, because I've been through this 100 times, this budget itself, and I kind of have researched some stuff, but he made a recommendation on the line. Could we decide, could you just
By a
see
line
if
item?
everyone else agrees that you're gonna make that recommendation, let's finish that one first.
Okay,
So if you guys agree that you wanna recommend $1,000, let's write it down, and then let's go to the next person's recommendation, like, can we just, that
Yep,
way we
we
keep
can
some
do it
order
line
and we
item.
just get through it a little faster.
works for me. So, we'll go back to the travel and training, you wanna start with that one? That was
Yeah,
the
well, Ken
original
had
one.
recommended $1,000, and
$1,000.
if you're all in agreement with that, we should just write it down.
So, I'm looking at previous year at 22. There's a year-to-date expense of 493. The only reason why I didn't look at this line item was based on the fact that if I was going to scratch everything that was in there, any remaining items that would normally go into our undesignated fund, we're just scratching more and more off of that. Is that correct, how that?
Yes.
So, my concern is if our undesignated fund, if we tap into that or that we reduce that, we will not be putting anything in that. So, I guess you can look at it as though it's flush fund or whatever.
If you look at the end of this, you're gonna see that $78,000 are going to that undesignated fund.
So for me,
I just want to make, if I could just add here, our undesignated fund right now is in negative territory because of no abatement. And we have to work towards building that up. And I'm not going to comment too hard in here. I know this is the finance committee where Carol and I are here to answer questions that you may have. So I would encourage you to ask questions if you may have things that you're not sure about. But I feel like you need to know the town's financial position, and I'm just reiterating what I've been saying all along. We need to work on rebuilding our fund balance, and by paring down to what is an austerity budget, you're giving the town no opportunity to rebuild that fund.
that was my original concern.
So there's no reason though, that we put it, let's say, you could address those as two separate things in some sense, right? You could, to be fair, make a list of things that you're thinking of that you'd like us to look at as a board. And then, we'll have to be closer to those numbers and I think it's okay to make your list. It's just, you're 100% right. I mean, if we cut that 78 out, that Ken calculated was going in, and next year it's gonna be.
That's where it's gonna come out of,
worse.
right,
Yeah.
that's where it's gonna.
The more you guys, the more we all trim and trim and trim and trim next year, all of a sudden we're
It's gonna have
see
to
it.
put it all back. So that's where,
But you guys think that $35,000 a year for traveling is sufficient?
So,
You gotta cut somewhere, guys.
so
I'm not
I
arguing
agree,
that.
I'm not gonna disagree that we need to cut, I don't know
It's gonna be tough cuts.
where, if this particular budget, $1,000 reduction will one have any significant impact on the end of the entire budget, but I don't know what this entails going forward. What if there's, we only see 2 years of expenses here on the travel and training, so we don't have like a 5-year history of that, so I don't know what it was, and if we've always been under. I mean, if I look at last year's, it was 2,200, so you could technically reduce it by $1,000 looking at the numbers that we see here, but is that feasible in the long run? And then what does that do on the back end is what my concern is.
Well,
So
those are the numbers that I had to work with.
The problem with cutting that tight is, for example, Don Chassis went to all the court stuff for Twin Rivers, right? If something like that comes up within this year,
Right,
then
you have nowhere to
someone
get
may
the
have
money.
to go, and there's no budgeting at all. So they've already cut it down to what, like he already went from 5,000 to 3,500 to what he felt was, safe. I'm not saying you shouldn't recommend like another $1,000 cut, and I'm not saying that nobody would go for that.
I mean, no, I'm fine with the number. I agree that, I don't see why we have to do those discussion and then we get that for the following year.
Your thoughts, probably kind of gave, what are your,
Well, I agree with Ed in there. I think this is almost nickel and dime it. I think there are some other places further down the line that we can make bigger cuts in traveling and expenses.
okay. So, I guess, are we gonna move on this as far as a consensus? What do we, I don't know how this typically worked in the past, like, clearly Ken is indicating he would like to see it reduced. The remainder is not on the same page, so is the consensus by majority, or how do we normally do? How is consensus typically done through this
Basically
process?
show you guys vote. I mean, you're not going to line by line have a recommendation each line by line. You basically, the recommendations that the budget committee has been making, other than here and there, has been recommending the budget of each department a lot. Recommended by the budget committee or not recommended by the budget committee.
Yes, but that's the final thing.
Or there's
That
something
the
to do
budget
now,
committee-
yeah.
The budget committee can make recommendations to
The
the
board
board if they want.
on ways to
This-
reduce.
Like if, let's say, we reach a consensus on this, Board of Selectmen would have to look at it, or not look at it, saying, no, we agree, we leave it as is. I think we have the right to make recommendations.
What I'm saying is, as a group, you need to come
Yeah.
to your own consensus as a group.
Right, and that's what Chris is
That's
asking,
what I'm
like,
asking.
he was looking for a suggestion, do we vote on this one line? I think, you know, there's, basically the majority wants to leave it alone, so move on. Cause you're gonna officially vote at the board meeting, at the budget meetings that you come
Coming
to.
up.
I have one question for you here. When it comes time for a meeting that the budget committee has to recommend or not recommend, are we gonna have this format or are we gonna have the warrants?
You're gonna have this format.
This format.
I'm not gonna have the warrants ready. My
Well,
warrants,
yeah.
my warrant articles are going to be basically the bottom line of each department. And there are some of the warrant articles that combine, like the EMS, you know, there's, some of the budgets are wrapped into one warrant.
Well, the reason I'm asking Gary is that the historical society mentioned that they want their own separate warrant. We don't have anything on the historical society at this point. So how do we?
I don't know that we're going to put that a singular social service request. Because you're creating a precedent for asking every social service
Okay.
request.
Yeah.
It's gonna continue to be under the,
Okay.
because you're essentially creating,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I was just, because they had asked for that, I didn't know if it was.
I think you'd almost be creating their own, like, department basically
Right.
in the
No,
town.
yeah.
no, I think they had asked for that as in probably out of an abundance of caution that they won't fall through the cracks, you know, but, I think that with her being the friend being there, you know, when the requests come in, they have to be made, you know, to the town, that won't be an issue.
What about transferring funds from one department to another department? Does that show up on here? Let's say like you were talking about taking money out of.
So typically what you do is you can draw down from like a reserve account, or sometimes if the fund gets healthy enough, but you just use that to reduce taxes. You don't say, we're gonna take it from this to do this,
Okay.
because it's really the same thing. You're just taking it from this, whatever the town's budget is.
But does that need a recommendation?
It would be a recommendation that you could make in the revenue,
On the revenue.
in the revenue discussion.
Okay,
You know, I mean, you do have to have your mind on it when you're on that department. If you're thinking that you wanna add some money, if you wanna add, if you think that one department is not sufficiently funded, then you would make that statement, right? To your recommendation, if that's the wishes of the finance committee.
Like, I would like to see 200,000 to cover public works for the grader.
Right.
Cause in my head, if the roads aren't cleared, we don't go anywhere.
Right.
So in my mind, that goes with, on the revenue
Oh,
side
yes.
too, you know?
That's
Yes,
easy.
but the only thing was, I was wondering when we as a finance committee can say, yes, we want that transfer to be
On the revenue,
On the revenue.
the revenue budget,
from
which is like
a
one
hundred there, 100,000 there, 100,000 there.
of, yeah, it's
Anything you
one of the last pages in this that we're going through tonight.
You can do it tonight.
Yeah,
So individually, each budget, we're gonna try to come to a consensus, whether it's through line item, if we have somebody that wants a suggestion. I think it's important to remember that we're just making a recommendation to the board. If I feel that my recommendations haven't been heard and it comes down to the time where we either approve or disapprove that, I can say, no, I don't approve of it, period, right? So,
And they can present it to the taxpayer.
right. So either way, it's gonna be,
I don't know how much weight that carries.
wow, yeah, or whatever it's worth, but, I mean, for us here, we're all looking at different things, and I don't want somebody to think that us as a finance committee is in agreement or disagreement that we shouldn't cut. I think it's important that we all know that the final step of this is we get to approve this entire budget or not. And if my personal recommendations haven't met my needs, I can say, I don't approve of any budget, period. I'm not going to recommend this at all. And if I approve of what we've done, then I can say I recommend it going forward, so just keep that in mind. I guess for this, we can either go right through them or only do the ones that we have objection to or this concern about. So I guess we'll start with that one on travel and training or governing body expense. All those in favor of reducing it by another 1,000, raise your hand. All those against? Raise your hand. You had a concern for legal.
so, I mean, yeah, this is just to get a consensus, I'm against going down to, and I am on this committee, so as far as putting a consensus together to make the list, but I'm just telling you ahead of time, I'm be very careful, like, if you guys are split, I'm gonna go with giving the recommendation to the board. You know what I'm saying? Whether I agree or not, like, if two say reduce and two say don't,
Yeah.
and I have to be deciding, I'm gonna say it's
Yeah.
going to the board, cause I'm not gonna take information
That's
away from the board that you guys are trying to, if that makes sense.
I see what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
trying to walk the line here of just being, fair and okay.
So on the legal fees, it was requested at 20,000. I don't remember what it was for, but I think it's the pending.
We have some cases pending.
That's why that's up there a little
Yeah.
bit this year. That's why you see it higher than typical. I don't know if that gives you the answer you were
Yeah.
trying to understand, or did you have any?
No, I mean, I went through stuff, there have been, the reason you guys have revised copies is because we've been cutting as we've been going, right? So no, I'm good with this one.
Anything?
And you had brought that up, the legal fees, is that something you wanna?
No, it's fine if it's something that's solid or.
I think he was just asking why it was up to
Yep, okay.
20,000.
Just for information.
That was my question on the last meeting, and it got answered, so I never had to ask why it all of a sudden went up. So for governing body expense in its entirety, do we need to ask the board to review this, or are we as a group okay with this? Can we do that here?
Okay, so you're looking at me,
Well,
And
you're
you have to
right.
remember,
You're right.
I
I
do
know.
too. But I would say that you had one recommendation
So-
that got shot down, so this number would be fine, so basically you're telling the board that you're fine with this number. Is that right?
Does that make sense as a consensus?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see what could happen.
So Department 100 as a consensus, as it stands now, finance committee is fine,
They just,
right? And you'll vote
just as an example,
later.
what could happen, I don't mean it's gonna happen, but we could go back and recommend, I want you to cut this, budget by 1%, 2%, whatever.
Right. What do you got?
See that again?
I mean, the bottom line,
Yeah,
let's say we're gonna approve the governing body expense.
Mhm.
The total.
Yep.
But if somebody wanted to make a recommendation, we'd like to see this department reduce its budget by 1%. We could do that.
you could, but I mean, I think it would be good for the board to have that information for their budget meeting, because we are getting very late.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
That's
understand.
what
So
we're
it's
trying to
like-
get to
You mean
tonight.
some of these other budgets as we go?
Okay,
Yeah,
Not saying it's gonna happen. But
right.
okay.
Department 110, town administration expense. Was there any recommendations? I'll start with Ken. What did you have for a recommendation?
Cut 12,000 on travel.
So you're saying cut the entire balance? 12,000?
So technically, just for information purposes, you can't do that. Some of that's contract and, people have, I don't know, Gary
so
has.
you have $3,600, hold on,
That, yeah, that you have.
Oh, it's already in the contract.
Yeah.
for my mileage, for my vehicle.
Okay. So I worked on that without knowing that.
It was mentioned.
Okay.
Okay, so you have $3,600, of that is for my stipend for mileage. You have to have travel and training, that pays for registration fees for classes, for all of the for the motor vehicle agents, the tax collector, the town manager, the G administrator. That pays for the cost of registering for these classes and getting, it's professional development. It's the mileage for the vehicles to go down at IRS approved rates. So their mileage is paid when they use their personal vehicles to go to trainings. It's for meals and lodging. It's for like MMA's annual convention. It's for where I go I go there for training sessions that they provide, so I can work on my certifications, not only for myself. Fire department staff, chief can go there, the code enforcement, tax collector, there are all sorts of classes made available through MMA's convention that people can work towards their certifications. So we've already reduced our line for travel. We cannot not have that resources, because not only, when you have staff that turn over and you lose them, you gotta retrain,
You get more money.
you need more money to be able to make that happen. If we don't have the means to get people trained, then we're not filling positions. Because you can't do motor vehicles without training. You can't be a motor vehicle agent without some significant training. You can't do elections, you can't do vitals, you can't be a tax collector. And training is always ongoing because the laws are always changing. Okay, with motor vehicle registrations and every legislative cycle, something
There's a
changes.
change that you have to go
And
do.
we rely on these trainings to be made aware.
But to the average taxpayer, roughly, the number would be like $3,000 a month for the town, people to pay for travel. It just doesn't seem like a normal number for traveling to the average guy. That's all I'm saying.
So,
You know what I mean? That's a lot of money. It sounds like a big number. Maybe in your eyes, I'm sure it's probably not.
Well,
but in our eyes,
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of money. I wouldn't want to spend it.
you know,
Um,
but anyway.
Well, this was an account that I was picking on too. And, I guess, in my thinking, when we first talked about this was, why should the taxpayer pay for somebody to go for professional development? And then, I mean, I was, in my
Yeah.
head a little even nasty about it, and then we have to give them a raise because they have a new certification and da da da, and that's how my mind was thinking. But when you start looking at the requirements, like Gary said, of like we have one girl here, if she leaves and you have to replace her, we cannot register any motor vehicles anymore in this town office till she's you have a leeway, right? But she has to be, the new person, he or she would have to be certified.
Mhm.
So when I started to understand that and each bill really that came in, and you're saying it's travel, but it's travel and training, so I get it. I mean,
oh yeah, that's a lot of money.
for me, that was a line item that I was picking at as well, but,
But it is.
and I mean, you don't, like, I guess if nobody quits throughout the year, no laws change, then you don't use it, right, Gary? I mean, and
No, there's always training, there's always something going on, but, that becomes a bigger number, and there's years that we don't use all of it.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Help reduce taxpayer liability later on, generally.
Yeah. But I mean, Carol just came on, she's started training, she's gonna have all kinds of training that she needs to attend. Keith is leaving, okay? All the, I gotta
You gotta
train somebody else now.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it's what it is.
So is that?
And most of the time, the trainings are never north of Bangor, we're in Augusta.
Yeah, I know, it's awesome.
I feel like we're gonna be hard pressed to find, like, we've cut quite a bit already there, so we're at the point now that we're like, oh,
Is that more information than what you had before?
I'm good.
I'm good with this one.
You? The only thing I saw in this one, believe it or not, was the $300 animal welfare, and the only reason why I question it is because it's also in Department 310, has a similar budget for the police department so I didn't know if we need both budgets for that. Do we only need one budget for that? So on Department 310, 35-070, animal control, there's a $500 proposed budget for the police department. It looks like they expensed out $100 in 2019, nothing so far this year. Do we need both of those budgets, or is there something else that happens to the town, there's a liability or something?
There was a time that we used to, the town used to have a program that we did with, to try to encourage
Rabies vaccine,
rabies
okay,
vaccine.
that's what I
There was a
thought.
program, and it was going on with, the mobile vet, I believe,
Okay,
okay, and I know Senegat was doing that too, and they
Yeah.
were sort of picking up some of that to try to create like a central hub,
I got you.
and so I think that's where that comes from,
That's the only reason, I didn't know if it was like two line items and two different budgets for the same thing, I didn't know, that's why I was questioning.
And I believe that the reason that it's here is because we hold all the data for dog registrations and vaccinations, so we kind of administer that through
I got you,
this budget right here.
that's all I had on that particular one.
I think also, we did, let me see what we had expensed in there. There's also a drawing that they do that, like Amy does, the clerk does, to try to encourage people to register their dogs. And so there's something that she does there to try to create a little bit of excitement. And we pull from a hat, and I don't know what it is, but, it's quite a bit of work to make sure everybody's dogs are registered.
I'm sure it is.
There's a lot of chasing down, making a lot of phone calls and reminding people that, okay, that, you know, they use this to try to come up with creative ways to get people in the door to do it, so they can do it themselves without reminders.
It is more welfare here, animal control for
Correct.
them, I got you. Okay.
Well, so you have on here this recommendation sheet you gave about like the phone service and all that stuff. I have talked to Gary about this a few times, we've had discussions, I've talked to other board members, and really once this budget's done, I think part of the goal is to immediately start on the next one, like just not, I mean, getting them to do all this, but to just, meet with people and come up with a few key projects that some of us could take for ourselves and research. So I don't know, like, you have this at a total, like, you're not wanting us to go and cut line by line the phone expense
If you
like
can, I
right now,
would,
cause
but
we have like with a system already and they have a bill. Like the only way to start cutting that
just cut the system.
on this, right, and I mean, that's a little hard to do without like doing all the homework
Having
for the
something else in
whole.
line.
Right, you know what I mean? So I don't wanna like ignore your recommendation to look at the phone bill and the phone system,
Right,
but it's a
cause I have,
huge.
that's a big bill town-wide, period, I think that's what he's getting at.
Right. But I don't think we responsibly can go department by department and say, you're gonna cut 1,000 off your phone bill, you're gonna cut 1,000 off your phone bill, you're gonna cut 1,000 off, cause it's already like a contracted, it's a package, right? It's a digital, a package you
Well,
have.
we have, so part of the, like, the phone, and some of the, like, for my department, like in admin, you know, like my cell phone, the town, this cell phone is paid for right now. I think that you need to consider that if, in order for us to move, if we're gonna move in a different direction, we have to have a plan, we have to evaluate.
You have to have a plan in place for
We
it.
have to evaluate what the options are and see what those things cost. So cutting that right now, without, in the absence of having something, information to help us, basically means we might not find any savings elsewhere, we might find a whole bunch of savings elsewhere, so right now, we are very late in our budget process, we can start working towards looking at a different system for the town, which, you know, we would have that information ready for the next budget discussion, which is not that far away, you know?
Well, that's what, cause he has some significant things here that I feel like this is stuff that's all been like being discussed here and there.
Yeah, see, he
And-
doesn't know that.
And it's all stuff that, I think, you know, that we can work toward, like you said, like I was looking for the words, like we can't just.
Arbitrarily just cut it off,
We can't just eliminate the phone system and not have
a plan.
a replacement.
I get
And the
that.
phone, like it's all linked, it's not like, you know, you got 3 phones on the wall somewhere and 3 lines and you can just remove one, it's a whole, right? I mean, it's,
This is a central hub,
yeah,
and we're a internet-based phone. And, Jason has an idea about having pushing wireless signal to our, other departments, and having less internet connections, per se. But I mean, we have a phone system, and we have Spectrum, we pay 300, just $400 a month, more or less, for the 3CX, for the web-based system, if you will. And then we have our internet fee in each of our facilities to be able to do that. To be able to use the internet, because it's an internet-based phone system. So the only options are right now, or you go from where we are at with Spectrum back to consolidated, okay, which is not a true broadband connection. Or we go from being able to push to wireless, like Jason has an idea about pushing wireless if we can, wherever we can, to eliminate some internet connections in certain areas.
Yeah, well, if my numbers are right, we're paying approximately, again, $3,000 a month for internet and phone for the town of Madawaska. I find it steep. It's a big number.
Mm.
You know,
So so it is a huge, I mean, it's a big number for the average taxpayer to think that we're
Think of
spending
it,
that kind
internet
of money,
and phone.
right? So from a
$3,000 a month.
committee standpoint, how does one on this committee, like, let's say Ken has a concern about how much we pay annually townwide for phone service. How does he address that here to make that recommendation to the board then? How's he supposed to do that?
Well, I think we should put a recommendation to the board that, I mean, even though we're not cutting the phone system on every line,
To look at the phone
this is a number
system?
that we have an issue with, and that's a number that we want them to review for next time.
Can I suggest maybe that as, what you guys can do as a finance committee is you're going to make your recommendation, whatever they are, but you can also have, side notes, the talking points,
Yeah.
concerns.
To,
That's
right.
like some good stuff,
As an,
Right, so
as
when
an,
I-
as an aside.
I don't want Ken to think that
right?
nobody here cares about any of that,
That's why
cause
I brought
everything
this
that
up.
he's got on there, I
It's all good
completely
stuff.
have the same
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yes.
But to look at it line by line and then always gonna get rejected by the end of this meeting, he's gonna be ready to throw his arms up in the air and say, what was the point of that?
No.
So how do
I'm
we-
okay with what the board decides.
So I think we can approve or we can recommend or not recommend the budgets as they are, and if we don't like something that we see, we can suggest to the board, you know, look at it.
This needs to
Here's
be
some of the things that we
Yeah.
think you might be able to look into, look at your phone townwide and,
I just did what I thought I
I don't know.
needed to do,
right,
and this is why we're here, right?
It's a lot of
exactly.
work in there, Ken.
There is a lot of
Yeah.
work in that.
No, I agree, and I think it's a project.
I just don't want to think that every time something's coming up
Right.
right now,
Well,
it's
that's
like,
why,
well,
that's
that's
why I
not
brought
gonna
it up,
make
cause
sense.
I saw that and I'm like, oh yeah, we're on the same page, okay, and, you know, but we can't address it in,
No.
in this
No.
by line of, like,
Mhm.
line item.
Mhm.
We just can't,
I
you know,
agree.
you have some really good stuff here.
I agree.
There's definitely some places that I agree, for sure. I just, how do we approach it in each one, I'm not
Okay,
sure.
so this one, I think you guys.
So I think we're pretty well
Good.
reached a consensus on Department 110 as well, as far as that being okay. I think what we, at the end of this, we can look back at like, because I think collectively, we're all very similar in some of our thoughts on this. You
And
know,
this
how
is-
they approach it is up to them, but,
And there's a $45,000 cut here, just to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why, like it's already been shaved a
quite a
lot.
bit, right. Have anything on that one? Okay, Public Health and General Assistance, Department 120, I had nothing in there for me at all.
Gary, there's a recommendation here to cut that by 10%, but legally, we're not able to cut general assistance, right? We're mandated.
We're mandated to provide GA, we don't know what we ask, what we're gonna pay out in GA, from one, we project out what we think we're gonna spend in GA, and hopefully we fall within that, but our GA has been trending down, based on the, you know, what we have a very good GA administrator, and we've been working hard and making sure people qualify for the general assistance. And so that's why you see the number, trending down
Mhm.
from previous years. And I think
Yeah.
we were in the 170s there for a while, way back. And so, that's a lot of work. But however, we do have to make sure we are statutorily required to fund,
That program.
yes.
But not this amount. So is it fair to say, GA services, 45 in there, that if he's asking for the board to look at cutting 10%, can the board legally do that? That's my question. Because we spent
There's
50%,
no
we
minimum
spent 50%
statutory
last
rule.
time.
There's no minimum statutory requirement for GA,
Okay,
okay, but we have to fund GA,
yeah.
whatever it is. So you gotta have something somewhere, so it's,
There's a myth in town that we provide hundreds of thousands of dollars in general assistance.
I'll tell you what,
used to,
We used to.
oh yeah.
I had a lot of people telling me, same thing. We pay for everybody's electric
That's
bill,
why
and this and that. I
everybody
look at
doing
this,
it
I'm not
now.
seeing it.
No, and just so
So-
you know, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about how that money is
Distributed.
distributed. It goes to the vendors, it doesn't go to the recipients. We pay the electric bill, we pay the heating oil.
So it goes
we pay-
directly to a vendor.
And it's discrete, and everything's assigned by case number. So if somebody qualifies for heating assistance, they are a vendor in our system, and we track that as a case
Okay.
number. So no person gets direct money from that, it's all used for, we pay the bills directly.
See, I figured we used 14,000, we're budgeting for 23, I figured we could easily absorb a 10% off of that, that's what I was thinking.
Well, I'm following you, that did cross my mind, but I also know that with COVID and the unemployment bump going away, that I wonder what this winter is going to bring, and I think there's gonna be a high demand.
And so if it's not there, you have to fund it from something, is that correct? If this winter, all of a sudden there was a spike in general assistance, we have to provide a certain amount of that.
We can't not fund it,
Right, so
doesn't matter what
And
you
then
put
the
in,
money's not there.
we have to pay for it.
it's catch
So if there's
$22.
$30,000 in requests and there's no money in it, we gotta figure out where to get that money somewhere.
Well, we're gonna overdraft it, and then we're gonna have to go to special, we're gonna have to pick it up at a town meeting to say, well, we need to fund this overdraft.
Yeah.
It's confusing, this budget system. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, at least I'm giving it a shot.
Well, no, yeah, but I'm trying to figure out how you address everybody's individual concern like that within the budget. So, anything on this one
No,
for you?
this is,
I'm gonna ask you on everyone.
Listen, he's recommending 10%, I would give the recommendation to the board and let them, let us
Let
look at
them
it.
look
I mean,
at
there's no, I mean, it doesn't hurt.
10%.
You say no to Ken all night, you're gonna get hit
Yeah.
by the sun.
Well,
no, you won't.
I'm just kidding.
He's a big guy.
No, you won't.
And again, you gotta keep your eye on the fund balance, you gotta keep
Yeah.
that in the back of your mind that,
So what's going in this year, what's transfers to the undesignated fund is part of this stuff, so if you trim all this away, the following year, you put nothing in there. and you
I've seen years that we were so lean with it.
It doesn't make sense. So then yeah,
And what happens really, like, we all wanna be lean so we can cut and cut and cut the taxes, but then,
the
you know,
unexpected.
you're so lean, the unexpected happens and you have nothing in the budget to cover it, and then you're in
That's-
trouble.
Well, then you go
That's
back
part
to,
of how we got into this predicament.
That's
Well,
what
that's
brought us
what's
here.
right.
And,
I mean,
Exactly.
That's right, so,
I think
not
too,
easy.
if this helps you, Wayne, is that when you think about this budget, think about next year's budget too, and in the sense that,
There's an effect.
yeah, it is true, and I said it, you know, once this budget year is done, it's gone. That business is done, there's nothing that carries forward, but it does in a sense that carry forward that if you underfund in areas,
Make it up somewhere.
you gotta make that up the next year, and it looks like an increase in taxes, you know? And so, what I'm trying to say is, you wanna be working on this year's budget, mindful of the next one, and how do you try to keep that mill rate stable?
Stable.
So you're not creating these
Spike.
spikes, that's, you know, it's great when it goes down, everybody's happy, but, all of a sudden, you know, you realize the next year wasn't quite enough, and then you're going up, and then now, you know, now it's terrible. So, if you try to balance that out from one year to the next, that's what people like, is stability in the mill rate, you know, and the increase is not so, you know, big at one time.
I say, I'm like Ken, I looked at all these smaller items and thought about, how, do we need that, do we need that, do we need that? But then, on the flip side of that is, what do you do in the event you need that extra? Where are you gonna get it from? And if you're not putting anything into that undesignated fund, you're going back to taxpayer. So your budget's gonna constantly do this all the time, so it's hard when you don't know this process, like for me, it's like my first year, I know it's his first year, and I'm trying to understand even how this.
This is my last year.
I'm trying to understand how this
Nobody told me that.
I sent you an email.
functions, you know?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, you did send me an email.
Here, didn't you say you're gonna miss him?
No, I didn't say that. Didn't go that far.
No, actually, I didn't read your email because I thought it would disappear.
Oh,
Because I couldn't, I was like, wow, we're gonna lose Joel. So maybe if I don't read his email,
so don't forget,
it'll go away.
don't forget on the, at the town meeting to nominate a replacement.
Yeah, I know a guy, his name is Joel.
So, are we okay on this particular budget for public health and general citizens?
Kind of on the fence first.
What do you got? Do we wanna push the recommendation that we reduce it by 10%? I mean, we can ask the board to look at it. I don't see why we
That's what I
couldn't
think too. I think we should keep it and see what they say about it.
ask the board to reduce it by 10%. I'm
That's
fine with
my
that.
opinion.
I'm fine with that. I'm good with that.
Good, yeah.
I mean, it's nickel, to me, it's nickel and diming, I don't see, $2,300 is not, if we cut 10%, $2,300 is not gonna make a
Well,
significant
so
impact.
if you cut $2,300, you're cutting it, you're basically taking it right out of the GA services, because the health officer is a mandated position, it's a stipend,
Right.
okay? And so it's basically gonna hit, from a percentage wise, it's gonna hit, the employee safety wellness, which is in our personnel policy. We haven't, very oftentimes, the employees don't take full advantage of that, but we have that obligation.
The obligation's there.
If they want it, then you have to provide it. So you're essentially, taking $2,300 out of a $16,000 GA budget.
10%'s even less than that, 1,600.
I'm gonna stick with sending it for the board to look at, review.
I would,
Ken?
And you're taking the minutes, so those notes are going in,
well, yeah, kind
or should I, you making a list of what they wanna recommend?
of. I have a list of what we wanna recommend, but
Okay.
I didn't write down, well, Chris
said
approved
this.
that.
Oh, no,
Just
no,
whatever
no.
we're gonna
I just
recommend.
wanna, I just
What
wanna
we're-
know that, I
what
wanna
we're
know that
discussing.
Gary's gonna have the list for.
That department.
So the first two, we were good, this one's recommended reduction by 10%. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna write it too, just so I can.
Department 130, municipal building expense.
Hey, I got nothing on that one.
Wow.
I have okay on my sheet as well. I'm okay on that one. You're okay. You're okay, you're okay. So, I'm gonna say that one's okay.
Yeah, there was a cut there already.
I'm just writing down where we make changes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that all makes sense. Safety complex building, Department 135.
I got nothing.
I had nothing on that one as well. These are good ones, I guess. Elections, Department 140. Anything on that one?
I do for 10% reduction.
I'm just gonna remind, I know I said I wasn't gonna interject too much, but I'm doing a lot of that.
No,
So-
this is a different
This is
year,
what
like
it's
this
for.
whole,
Yeah,
this
it's for.
election, because it didn't happen in the last fiscal year,
Exactly.
and now we have,
An election,
we
presidential
have to
year.
pay heat for the like, there's so much more to pay for this
Mhm.
year,
Can
This
that's
I-
why that went
This
up.
town meeting was supposed to happen in the last budget.
Yeah,
So we have basically two town meetings.
It's gonna be
in this
double
budget.
there,
can
in
I
this budget.
step back to that safety building complex, 111,
Oh, too late.
135?
Too late.
We've already done that.
I saw that, but I didn't.
I wrote it down.
So,
You're done.
there was an issue with the roof,
We put that in the reserves, capital reserves.
so it's under a different one.
Yeah.
Okay, move on. Never mind. Elections are, I'm okay with the elections.
I'm
Yeah,
okay.
cause it's double, basically. That's why it went up so much.
Okay,
Does that make sense, or?
Yeah, Lori's explanation on it.
I
Well,
remember, yeah, there was an explanation given from,
Amy.
Amy. And I think
Couple of things.
next year it's gonna drop back down, I think.
Well, there's a couple of things that happened. There's the fact that we weren't able to have our town meeting in the last budget, and then,
So-
and then the last dollar increase of minimum wage.
That's what it was,
It's
that's
affecting
right.
that as well.
So, ballot clerks had to get their pay raises, basically.
Did you say
Yeah,
battle
yeah.
clerks or ballot clerks?
Ballot,
Okay.
battle clerks.
Battle.
It's gonna be quite a battle.
Yeah, we may have to up that fund.
So, okay, this,
So next year, when we see this budget, it'll be back down
should be back
Yeah.
down.
to where it should be.
Hopefully.
As long as
Hopefully,
there's no more COVID or
Yeah.
tornadoes
something new
or
or something, yeah.
some new alien babies taking over the world or.
Development codes and assessing,
Yeah, I recommend that we have combined the jobs, if possible.
combine,
That's, if I'm correct, this is 2 employees, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that mentioned before, combining these two jobs?
Well, it was mentioned, but I don't know.
No, the decision was made.
what do you know? Can you help us
Yeah,
understand this one?
well, so this was another one that we were having discussion about. There's actually 2 vacancies right now in that department. If you combine those 2 jobs, and you guys are gonna get this, right? You combine those 2 jobs, now you have 1 person doing your grant writing, your assessing, and your codes. And if that person leaves, all your eggs are in one basket, and there's no way that that's not a
Somebody just gonna
one-person
find
job.
out on
It's
that.
not a one-person job, it just isn't. And then, it was brought up that we should contract out, the assessing like it used to be, but there's really nobody out there anymore that's doing this kind of thing. There's a few people, but it's just not, I think that's ongoing discussions that the board and Gary are having of how to maneuver and change those positions, but, I do not recommend that that's gonna happen in this budget or, you know, it's on the, it could be on the list for future reference, like our phone bill, but we cannot, I mean, the board even, I don't believe, can sit there and say, okay, we're cutting that in half without understanding the implications to the community. I think right now too, we have contracts out with 2 communities that we have some work we have to do for them. So we have to get out of those contracts on the revenue side, cause don't forget there's revenue with this.
Right, there's offset, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have, a couple of, big projects really that we actually need
Oh,
the
yeah.
community development person. I don't know, do you have something to add, or?
Yeah, I'm just, you know, it's hard for people to grasp the workload that's in there right now. I mean, we're all drinking from a hose. If you combine those positions, you can only drink so much water. I mean, it's gonna come out. So, you know, you have to see it, you have to be in it to understand that the workload is really there. And it's not just for, you know, when there's grants that are applied for a business, you know, whether it's for an expansion or to create jobs or whatever, you know, whatever the program is, there's an incredible amount of paperwork that takes place, and it's not done after the grant has been awarded. Okay, they gotta close it out, there's an audit that takes place, you know, there's compliance, it's just paperwork, lots of it. And so, you gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing, you gotta have somebody that's in there, there's financial transactions, they work closely with the finance office to track the flows of money. Because when we do grant writing, when we do grants, we are the pass-through for what are basically state and federal programs, right? The grants, the monies don't come from us, they come from state and federal funding sources, but we are the liaison,
You're kind of the administrator.
and we are the administrator, and the funds will come into us, into our coffers, and we disperse them out. And we'll also have to make sure that you know, the program is being adhered to and followed, compliance, if there's job retention, you know, there's all kinds of requirements that if a business creates 5 jobs, those jobs have to pay a certain, you know, based on the grant application, they may have to pay a certain rate of pay. Well, we gotta go to the payroll and we gotta certify whether or not the business actually created those jobs for a certain amount of period of time at a certain rate of pay. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. It's just not 5-page application, got a grant, great, we're done, moving on. It's more than that. So there's a lot of work involved. And I will say that the town of Madawaska has fared well having its own economic development office. The Ames Shopping Plaza, not for this office, who knows? The only reason why things moved over there is because we had an economic development office and an administrator there who was going after it and making things happen. So, I guess my point is, that's one of the departments for economic development. You can't really quantify the benefits of it sometimes, but you have to look at the jobs that were created and the businesses that were started and stuff like that as a whole. So I know you're not advocating to close the department. I'm just saying is that when you load up one person to the extent that they can't, you're setting them up to fail.
Yeah, I understand.
You know.
Well, and you were, there are board members interested in contracting back out the assessing. It's not a closed discussion, but it's not a discussion that we can have in the next week and just, you know, you.
Say we did it.
Well, right, it's kind of like the phone thing. It has to go on the list for projects so that we can address it and actually know what we're doing, you know, it's,
How many years have we had this development employee or?
oh, before Susie was,
Arthur was hired as a town manager slash community development director, and the board reduced, it was too much. So they basically, at that point, they brought in one person just before Susie.
yeah, I forget her name.
So if you look back on that board, Jason, you can see where Arthur
been a
started
while.
his tenure somewheres.
I know he left, I think, in 2004, and I think they brought,
Looks like 87.
Yeah, right there, 87.
yeah, I'm not sure.
That was the first time his name was there.
Oh, I know where I had that. I have that information. Do you wanna move on, Chris, or
Does
you
that
wanna keep
help?
talking, I can,
Explain that, or is
but yeah,
there another?
it's been
Yeah, it helped explain it.
20 years, 27 years.
Doesn't make it better.
No,
No, it doesn't. I get it.
that's $250,000.
Yeah, I know, and that's what's tough.
And
Like, holy-
from what, as a taxpayer, looking from the outside,
Know
you know
what
what
you
I mean?
know.
It's, you know, the businesses are closing, that's closing, that's closing. Did that, whatever half of this $120,000 a year help? I'm not seeing it,
Yeah.
my feeling. So anyway,
Anything on that one?
No, I mean, I'm good with it.
The, I get it, but the 120 is not only,
yeah,
it's also
I'm
like,
just throwing that out there.
you know, codes and assessing.
Yeah,
and,
I understand
and,
that. Okay,
Are we still talking about combining positions?
Well, she said they were looking at it, and it doesn't
Well,
seem, there's been talk or discussions at their level.
No,
Not-
I just
it's
wanna
not-
know what I'm,
it's really not feasible, I know, I'm just saying my personal opinion, I'm not saying the board made any kind of
Decision, right?
I think I started looking into this myself, you know, and I came in, I think my list wasn't far from yours.
Mine was the same way
And
when I
then you
first
start
started.
looking at like the actual work that's done, that as a taxpayer, you don't realize what actually got
Correct.
done and which business actually benefited
Right.
and
Correct.
you know, there's a grant right now that needs to be tied up, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there was half a dozen jobs there that were kept because I mean, I don't know the exact, we had a dollar figure though for the grants and stuff that came out just in the last year, right?
Well, I mean,
I remember
he
that.
picked up that, $100,000 facade grant for the businesses, he picked up the $500,000 NBRC grant for downtown revitalization. There's another one, man, what is it? Anyway,
The
he's,
tanks at,
tanks at Bob's Service Center, there's more, he's probably
Oh, yeah, that's right.
leveraged probably close to $1 million of grants since he's been here.
and he was doing the assessing that we were actually contracting out for whatever amount of money that
17,000.
was. So yeah, I know there are other board members that are on the same page as you, but it's all like discussions that, even if we said today, Ken, we wanna eliminate a position, like, the ramifications of that, because we have contracts with other communities, and like, we have to understand the big picture of it.
I understand what you're
I
saying.
can't train, I
So-
can't fully train one person to get certified to do CDBG, assessing, and code enforcement all at the same time. Person will never be, will be trained all
You
the
train
time,
for the whole year.
the whole year.
Yeah.
I mean, and who's gonna do that?
Who's gonna wanna do it all?
Who's gonna wanna do it? There's a lot of responsibility there. A lot.
I don't feel like it's totally impossible to make changes, but the other side of that is that anyone, including Ken, who wants to come in and look at the position and what gets done and talk to you about it and look at the projects that are pending, once you do that and you actually look at paperwork and say, oh, it's kind of eye-opening, you know? I think you should just do it all.
Sure.
Dog catcher, too.
Dog catcher too.
I think there's no harm in putting that on your list of stuff that you want to ask the board to review. It's not like we can't review it before this, but.
Are we recommending that they review it, or just as a side?
I think just as a side note, I don't know as if we were,
You don't have to put it on there just for me. If I'm the only one that agrees with this, I'll stand back.
I think there may be an opportunity if, I don't know. I don't know as though, I 100% agree that we can combine two people into that one job and that's it. But I'm not saying that there's not another way to look at that when they're both open right now. So I don't know, I'm going to,
We've been going through this discussion, as far as the budget goes, it's impossible for you guys to think that the board is gonna go ahead and cut this in half and eliminate a position. I really think that's my own personal opinion. I don't see anything wrong with giving the board members a list and saying, hey, we're worried about the phone system, we're worried about this department, and let the board members come back and give you a presentation of
So,
how
I
this
agree.
works.
that's why
Like,
I'm.
if you're asking the question, there's no reason you cannot ask the question.
Right. So I see it differently
I'm
than
not
him, but
saying
I'm
that-
on the same
Right,
level. I think there's some opportunities there, I just don't know exactly what they are. Like for me, I know that there's some updating of tax maps that was discussed 2 or 3 times throughout this whole process. That's a big expense, either to go digital or to update the ones that we have. To me, that should be something that needs to be considered, that's within this budget, correct?
that's not gonna happen.
This budget does not include going
No.
digital.
Right,
This
but
budget
what I'm saying
has
is,
no-
that's the same, for me, that's the same concern that I have as him, whether reducing the people that are 2 to 1 or whatever it is. My concern is you got tax maps that need to get addressed somewhere in the near future, you know the expense is coming, but are you gonna wait till it falls in our lap, or are we gonna try to work on that for the next cycle type of thing? More of a concern, not necessarily that this budget's no
Right,
good.
and
So
that's
I
why I'm
think that's
saying,
more of a concern.
there's no reason you can't bring your concerns and
As a
say,
side note.
you know, cause I mean, a lot of people have the same concerns, and like I said, I came into all of this with a lot of the same ones that Ken has, and you know, after you ask the questions and you actually sit down and start doing the work, you realize, oh, you know.
See, and that's what's hard for us, cause
Right.
I'm with him, I'm looking at certain parts of this budget based off the information that we have, and we don't have the other knowledge, so it's hard to understand it all until we get to this point.
Yeah, we're just looking at the big number.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying, for going for the
$229,000.
next time,
If you
there's
wanted
no
the
reason
detail,
to ask
the
that
detail would be
question.
this thick.
Huh?
If you wanted the detail, you know, your book would
Yeah.
be this thick.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay, and so, you know, we try to reduce that to a manageable amount of information, you know, and that's why we're here to ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
and to answer questions.
there's no reason that that question can't be asked, Ken, and that you can't, Gary can't sit down with you and explain and show you, or we can as a board discuss it.
And make him more
And so
comfortable
that
with
the
this.
next time the budget comes around, you
Exactly.
know where the number comes from, you know?
So I was going to suggest that this budget, as it stands, okay, but also on a side note, consider looking at
Yeah.
either combining jobs or, you know, reducing costs on the next budget or something, I don't know how you would
It's too
say
bad
it,
that,
but.
it's too bad that some stuff that gets done in the office is, you know, either because, usually because the business itself needs it to be confidential for a certain period of time, and projects that are ongoing,
Cause you'd understand more what's
legally
going on.
can't be discussed, because if we could sit here and say, okay, like, this is what's coming, and what we know is coming, you would get it, but I guess at a point, you almost have to just trust that we're
People
doing,
that's there
we're
doing the
doing
right
the right
things.
thing, and I know sometimes that's been hard, but, to me personally, I see that community development grant writing position at this time, and it's, you know, we've got a project pending and something we're really all hopeful about, and we need this. So, I mean, I wish I could just go blah and say, this is what's happening, and we're doing this, and this is what we're trying to do, and, but,
Just
you
know
know,
it's easy.
if you guys want change in the community, you gotta give us, the people and the money to try to create the change.
Yeah.
You know, and we can eliminate all day long, but then in the end, there's nobody to do the work, and nothing's gonna get better.
And people will be unhappy,
Yeah, yeah,
that the town is back and going back.
We don't want that.
yeah.
So what did you put down for a note?
I said, as far as the department, it was okay, but, as a side note, further review for this department, further review. This
Good with
department.
that? I'm good with that. I like that.
Okay.
I like it. Department 300, ambulance expense. So, for this one, we'll look at the expense budget as the expense budget, and then we can deal with the revenue side on the other end, which will, if that makes sense to you. For this budget itself, I'm okay with it,
Mhm.
but I have questions on the reserve funding later on, put it that way.
I'm okay with it too.
Good? Police,
I'm good with that.
I'm okay with it.
This one you guys noticed, there's been a significant cut since the last copy you had.
I think there was a proposal, I think we knew about that on the last meeting, no?
Yeah,
This
okay.
No, we
police
were working
Yeah.
on
I think that was,
trying to crunch
yep,
numbers in respects to health benefits and positions, and,
I remember
you
that.
know, we're having to figure out 6 months of the budget, it's as is, and then changing from there on, and projecting out what those health insurance costs might be. So this, you know, Carol and I spent quite a bit of time on this last week, and just to make sure that we were good to go, and that's the day that you got that.
Yeah, so
I
the
think the day
salary,
before we
salary and
finalized
wage line
everything.
has been cut since the last
Okay.
budget you got.
Right. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think if I show up in Gary's office one more time, he's gonna throw something at me.
Fire department expense,
I'm good.
Department 320, I'm okay with it. Again, I have other concerns that we'll talk about on the other end of it, but I think as far as their expense budget goes,
Right.
I'm okay. You, you're good?
Yep, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with
Three
EMA.
25 EMA, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
Any concerns for you?
I'm good with that.
Question,
Yes.
would, let's just say that we would decide, okay, so is this where the emergency generator should go, or would that be in the capital?
Capital.
Okay, I'm good.
The generator switch,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like if we were to try to
I
fund
sent you
that.
that number
Yep.
today, though.
I got it.
There was a fund for that somewhere already, huh? Part of? Alright, we'll talk about when we get there.
Different generator,
Okay.
I think.
Oh, yes, it is, you're right, yeah, I'm thinking of a different one. Library.
I get a little concerned. I don't own it, town Madawaska don't own it. I don't think we should fund it.
Crickets.
Crickets.
Yeah,
I'll give you my own opinion and it's,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's
that's
talk.
what we're here
Yeah.
for.
I can't see. I can't see compromising my morals and eliminate jobs to shut down the library. People complain about empty buildings in town, they'll probably wind up being empty,
It's not our building.
I know, but still, and it's getting used. That's my own opinion, you have a right to yours, this is mine.
Tip.
I struggle.
I did too.
I don't know. I guess for me personally, and I'm not saying there's no benefit to it, I'm not seeing a greater benefit to the community out of the library at this moment. In talking with the department manager during that last meeting, I feel like there's a 40-hour position there that isn't being utilized for 40 hours for a regular work week there. I feel like that's some of those hours being paid at 40 hours, and then we're also doing yard work or snow blowing and getting paid for that on in the same time, which would have been my typical 40-hour work week. I guess I'm not understanding this budget, so for me, it needs to be looked at the bare minimum, needs to be looked at. I don't know where the answers lie within it, but I think there's room for improvement, a significant amount of room for improvement.
What I
there.
struggle with, Chris, is the numbers he gave us, 14,000 to 15,000 people or books taken out or whatever.
What does
You
that
do-
mean?
You do the math, and that's on average 60 a day.
Yeah,
Do
and
you get 60
Well,
a
that's
day?
why I'm saying I'm not
So I
understanding.
question the numbers.
I think that was a big issue with me too.
You know, we have a salary for the librarian at 43,000, we're paying another almost 18,000 library aides. And then we're paying an accountant and a bookkeeper for over another $3,000. I have a hard time with this one. I don't find we're in the city of Bangor. I struggle with the expense of this, especially when this town has zero say on where that money's going. Is that not correct? That money goes there?
Or the Manning.
It's an expense?
We're only there to fund.
That's it.
That's
So,
what I see.
I'm not saying that there's not a use for a library. I struggle knowing the fact that that's one of 3 that we have available in town.
Mhm.
I find that if students need it for a learning objective, it's there. At the same time, we're also pushing, you know, online resources and things are going digital and all these other things. I struggle with the actual need of a public library at this time. I really do.
Just as a point, Chris, the 2 other libraries, the public doesn't have access to them. They won't let them in
So,
during school
I
hours.
understand that, but I also
It's just
think
a
that that library has an opportunity to do what other libraries do, and there's ways that they can generate a revenue that, whether it's online access or, computer or, library cards to get in or whatever it may be, I don't know. But I would recommend that the board look at other towns and see what they are doing for their libraries, see how they're functioning, see what those budgets are in a comparable community. That would be my recommendation, because I'm not sitting well on this one at all.
Neither am I, but, it's a very big decision.
Yep.
And I feel that the 5 people here, well,
Yep.
so should be 7, 5 people on the board. I don't think that a couple of handfuls of people should make that decision.
That's right.
I feel that the taxpayers should go out and make a decision on their own.
We're just making a recommendation.
I know.
But I think that where we hear it, you know, I'm hearing it from the board and we hear it, and I think that, again, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record, a little bit late in the game, in this budget cycle because of COVID. I think that the fair due diligence that would be applied here would be the board, selectmen meet with the library board at some point, maybe in the next budget, to say, okay, what are we doing, what's going on, you know, we have some concerns, let's have a discussion. That hasn't happened yet. And so, to be fair, are we being fair if we don't give them their due diligence, to be able to have that discussion? That this board is taking a hard look at this, don't get me, I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but they are taking a hard look at the library.
No, I was getting there.
Okay, I got ahead of you. So,
That's okay.
it is something that is being debated, for sure, Ken. But I'm also mindful of that we're not that far off from the next budget process either, and, you know, by the time we're all done here, we're probably several weeks away from, at least a month away from town meeting. We're further, you know, we're a good quarter into this budget already. And so, they've already incurred expenses 1/4 of this budget, is what I'm saying.
I got it.
And so if you cut them right now, the cuts are, they're gonna have to make up what they've already spent there, you know? Cause they've been assuming the same, the continuing resolution that we've been operating under.
I mean, I agree, it's something we should look at in next budget period. I don't think cutting and doing anything now is helpful.
I don't think so either.
I think, I'm guessing, I'm thinking a majority of.
Does anybody want water?
I think a majority of the board is looking at, a small cut. What they may see as a large cut, but to us it's not. I mean, we are looking at it, we have a board member who's actively looking at, all the other communities, what's the budget, what's the town give, what are the hours that are open. I would personally not support shutting it down. I cut 2 hours and some changes in operation, but that would be for their board to decide it at that point.
Yeah, we have no say.
It's not for us.
The only thing we can say is fund us.
Right.
They just want the money.
But,
have no say.
you're not the only person that has said, shut that down.
It'd be different
So I don't
if the
feel-
town of Madawaska owned it.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's a bad thing to add to the list of stuff that we need to research. A lot of, some of the work is being done now, by another board member, so. I do wanna point out that it's not just the kids that use it, there's a lot of adults, you can go digital, but there are those adults who don't have, internet necessarily and use the library. Now that ACAP has closed the career center, there are people doing unemployment claims there and going there to do their weekly certification, and, I for one would not want to pull the wool out from under them for sure.
Immediately right off the get-go.
Right,
I
I mean, there are
understand.
other communities that have their libraries open less hours, you know,
That would be a possibility.
so I think those are things that they could look at, but, and library fundraisers, there's all kinds of, but like Gary said, I think too, that would also be we kinda have to address that with their board and, you know. I personally, am, when I get back to the, like, when we have a board meeting with the Board of Selectmen, I'm suggesting or supporting a cut that's gonna be suggested. It's not substantial, but I'm gonna just, you know, let that board member do their thing and go from there. So you're not being ignored, Ken.
Well, maybe we could make that
So
recommendation.
can,
Cut the
Well,
budget.
can we ask, can we say, so let me throw this out on the table and see if we're in consensus for that. Can we come to a consensus that we'd like to see I'm gonna throw a number out, 10% reduction in this year's budget with further review for the following year's budget? Does that, ask for a reduction this year with more to review next year?
So, I just wanna clarify, so basically, if you're gonna propose a percent reduction in the department, where in the department, because you obviously, you got a salaried employee, that's not gonna change. So it's going to be in the operating expenses.
It's gonna be under the operating expenses exactly where it would need to come out of.
So a 10% cut there would be $43 million.
No, they're talking 11. They're looking at the whole 112, or are you talking the 43?
The whole,
I'm looking at the whole thing, but I think what he's saying is it wouldn't be able to come out of the salaries and wages on,
Well, that would be up
On
to
the
them
top.
to decide
Yeah.
what they're gonna do, right? I mean,
so,
like, is it really for us to tell the library board,
No,
you know,
so and I
really to
think that's
say,
the hard part.
this is the money that, and you guys figure out where you're gonna
I
reduce
think
that.
that's what the hard part is, right? So we're funding something that we really
have no
have
control.
no control over.
None.
So I think a small reduction of 10% across the board, however they do it with further review for the next budget cycle. That's my own opinion,
Yeah.
but
I would go to the value of, that right there. I mean, how many employees do we need there? Or how many,
so and
it's
that's
up to
what I
them to
don't,
decide,
they
yeah,
have
I'm
to
sure.
figure it out, and I think
But I
that,
think,
for
10%
due
is not
diligence,
asking for too much.
I don't think 10% is a lot. I think there's some things that could be, streamlined a little bit, let's say. So, that's my thought, 10% reduction current year with further review.
I'm gonna keep in there that the board of the select people should meet with the library trustee.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no revenue from this place, and even if there was some, it wouldn't be the town that would get it, cause we don't own it, correct? So if there is revenue, if they are making money, we don't know about it.
They're
That's-
not,
We don't know that.
yes, we do.
We do?
So are you okay with
we
it?
just got that today,
yeah,
actually, and there's nothing,
donation here and there, but
there's like a
$1,000.
a late book fee or a.
So we spend $8,000 a year on books? In periodicals, $8,000?
That's where they're showing us their expenses.
Like, they don't have a big, there's no big chunk of money sitting there, you know, waiting.
That we know of.
No,
No, we know that.
well,
We-
no, we don't, we know that,
Okay.
we should have, they're not everyone's a criminal, Ken.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying they're criminals.
No, there's no big bank account there.
Are you okay with that
Change.
10%
No,
reduction?
no,
Cause you want more.
correct.
You want more? You're okay with the 10% and further review?
Yeah.
I know
I'm good.
you're pretty much. So,
I'm good. And I'm not decided on anything,
Right.
I'm just,
I know
I'm,
you've spoken that you're already looking,
yeah,
doing something. So is the consensus 10% this year with further review? That's our, kind of where we're at as a group, or not really, or?
It's the easy way out. Cause whatever, you have to remember that whatever we recommend and all this is.
They could throw that all at the table, that's right.
I've seen it.
That's right.
I've seen a school board member tell us that the finance committee wasn't gonna tell them where to cut.
And that's why they don't cut.
Yeah, So we are only there to say, recommend.
Whether
or
we
recommend.
approve
So,
it or not,
you know,
yeah,
I couldn't,
recommend.
I want that on the table.
So what
Yeah, wasn't too happy.
what do you have written down right now? You
I
have 10%?
First of all, yeah, research other communities, what they are doing with their libraries, maybe have select people in the library trustees meet, ask for a 10% decrease with further review.
I'm good with that. You're good with that?
For the record, I don't even believe for a minute you're gonna get that attitude from one board member,
I know,
so.
I know who it is. That board member, I'm getting off track.
I mean, like our board.
Yes, I know. That board member, I watched, I wasn't at the meeting, I was injured, I watched it. And, he questioned whether the finance committee should even exist. He says, what are they doing? We don't need that, we don't need that.
On our board right now,
Yes.
oh, I missed that whole,
Then, at the following meeting, he came up to one of our board members and asked that person to push that. Well, what is it? Do we need to be there or we don't need to be there? I mean, not, but, you know, it was done, I saw it
Yep.
done. But, you know, he didn't have to try to influence, I mean, you have your own opinion, you have your own
That's right.
opinion, you have your own opinion. Didn't need to influence other people like that.
well, I've been pushing to have you here, okay?
You have. You're the one. You're the only one.
No, that's not. I think sometimes things are misunderstood because I've had conversations with all of them. And I mean, if I'm remembering the meeting you're referring to correctly, I get that conversation happened after, but sometimes conversations happen before people have all the information that they
Right.
need,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
they realize that,
Yeah.
no, I think pretty much all of us are embracing this process and looking for help and,
Yep.
None of us think that we know everything or are smart enough to do this alone, so.
I think we're all in it for the same reason. I think everybody's looking to save some money. It's, you gotta understand the process and justify your decisions, that's all it is.
Have to balance everything
That's
out,
it.
make everybody happy.
Moving
Except
on,
for,
Yeah.
Public Works, Department 500. I have zero issues with this, so I'll deal with this on the other end.
Okay, and the 200, it goes in capital, is that correct, Gary? So I would not
Mhm.
even bring that up here.
Right.
Okay. So we're okay with this one?
Yep.
You're okay with that one? Parks, Rec and Maintenance, Department 600.
I think we're living a little large.
Can I share some information?
You absolutely
I
can.
have been doing a lot of information gathering, and, first off, and I'm not trying to change your mind, cause if you don't change your mind, I'm
No,
gonna
no.
tell you where I was at when
That's
I
right.
first saw this budget. I myself thought it was a bit ridiculous. And what I failed to realize was it's parks, rec, and maintenance. So, parks, Bicentennial Park, Beyond Park, you
Birch
know,
Point.
the mowing at the cross, Birch Point,
All
the
the flag
bathrooms,
fields,
there's bathrooms at some of the ball fields for the
Yep.
school,
boat landing.
the
Boat
boat
landing.
landing,
We do, mow for the, pollution control.
yeah, they're
Campground.
cleaning the
Campground.
police station, like, it's not,
And the new park and park.
no, yeah, you know, you look at, and I get that the townspeople, you know, are basically funding donations at this point for some of these things, but, they're the ones who put up the tents for the flea market, they're the ones who put up all the stuff for the trade show, all of the Acadian Festival, you know, did you ever get a bill from the rec?
No.
You know, so if you guys don't take all of that into consideration, it does seem huge. It's not. To me, I've discovered that as a matter of fact, I feel like it's too bad that all of the extra services they provide that they cannot be, billing out for.
Exactly.
Because then it wouldn't look so bad, and they cross departments, so basically, I don't know, Gary, you probably have more to add to this list that I'm not thinking of.
That's why some days I wish I could look at this, it's 3 different departments, parks,
I thought I
rec.
got in.
Correct me if maintenance is Gerald pretty much, is that correct? He kinda holds that title.
So with the way things are structured now, we have parks, recs, and maintenance. And we have 2 laborers full-time there, that work hand in hand with Gerald on the maintenance side, facilities, parks, and with Sam and Diane on the parks, on the recreation side. And so the way that they just kind of float for once, it's all within the same budget, but when they're doing maintenance kind of stuff, and buildings and grounds, Gerald's the boss, and Alan is the guy underneath Gerald, because Gerald's only part-time, okay? And so, when Gerald's not around, Alan is kind of second in command. He gets his marching orders from Gerald, and they do their thing. But when the rec department needs them to set up, to bring out bleachers, to do some heavy lifting and things like that, ice skating rink, they're there. So they're kind of multi. They do a lot of stuff. We mow all the fields. I think that what's lost, and Lori and I kind of talked about this today, is that they do a lot of stuff. They are the support network for a lot of things that go on in town that people don't see. And yes, it would be fantastic if we could build and get some of that money back, but we would be billing the organizations that ask us for money, right? King Festival, Chamber of Commerce, and so bill them that way. They're just gonna up their increase for what they need for their funding. And so I think that the rec department, and we're tasking them with more work. We've got 2 more parks on Main Street. We have programming that we're gonna be working with the chamber to do stuff in downtown that brings people into the downtown, so people can come and shop and be in our downtown. And so we're trying to be a little bit more innovative and reinvent. And you're gonna hear reinvent in another conversation coming up, to be a little more different, so that they can play a role in our economic development efforts to try to draw people into our downtown, so people can come here and shop and spend some money. But what we need is organizational skills, and we need muscle, and that's where we're gonna get it from.
So, and I'm not telling you guys not to recommend a cut, this is stuff I didn't know. The multi-purpose building, the Boy Scout hut, the bicentennial park bathrooms, the bathrooms in Bull Landing, Birch Point, the police department, they do the sweeping and mopping, farmers market maintenance, around it, the playground equipment at all the parks, the gazebo, the community gym, they're manning and, maintaining that. There's just, the list just goes on and on and on. St. David, Cross Landing, and Schoolhouse, they're mowing there, I didn't know that. Yeah, the Boy Scout grounds, and we could start trying to build people for some of this stuff, but
You're billing the same people that need the help.
right, so whatever, cuts you guys decide you wanna make, I just wanted to make sure you're aware that, all of that stuff's getting done,
I have a unique position with the rec department over the past 5 years on the skating festival, so I know what those guys do. I will I will ask the questions that get asked to me. And then maybe you or somebody can help answer those. So we know what they do, or we know what their jobs are. The questions that I get, what do they do in the winter? So, how do you, I don't know how to answer all those questions when somebody asks me, what does the rec do in the winter? Well, when you say rec, what do you mean by rec? Because I know what some of those guys do, I don't know what everybody does day to day, that's not, I don't,
The laborers always have work to do, first of all. There's always custodial work. We have them cleaning the safety complex. You know, there's no shortage of work. They maintain the ice in the winter, when you can have ice. So they start when it gets cold enough, and they maintain it as long as they can. They clean snow around the buildings.
They're the ones winterizing like the bathrooms and the stuff like that, right? As the winter
Winterization.
starts. So like late fall when it, you know,
Things get shut down in winter, they get mobilized, they gotta get reopened in the spring, you know, you gotta clean up the parks, there's just, how would I say that? Is it slower in the winter? Maybe, but you gotta have a staff ready to go when it's time for them to go, and you gotta know what they're doing. So, you know, I don't, you know, I think that part of what we're looking to do is take advantage of our winter to do a lot more planning for programming in our downtown.
Okay.
And so, those are discussions that have started, and are going to accelerate, for the coming season, for the next summer.
and there's a person less in the winter, or half a person less, right? The ground like, they do have less staff in the winter.
Well, yeah, we don't let go of part-time staff, for sure. But we have our 2 full-times that we don't, you know.
But there's a part-time maintenance staff
Yeah,
in the summer,
yes.
or a part-time parks, wherever it falls. I guess what's really misleading is that it's all in
What's
one
misleading
budget, right?
is looking at the number,
Yeah,
comparing it to other communities.
yeah.
It looks very large.
But if you took, let's say, the maintenance people out of there and put them
somewhere
where,
else.
with public works or with the safety complex, for example, it becomes more clear, I guess. I don't know,
Well, it changes,
it doesn't lessen the
It doesn't.
number, but it makes it look, cause I mean, when you think rec, right, you think it's just all the games and the fun and it's the maintenance side of it, the parks and maintenance
The parks
side of
and
it that
recreation.
skews that number, that makes us all think that it's a huge number, when really, if you put maintenance under public works or a safety complex, it would just bring up those budgets.
and you can put those kinds of positions in the public works department, but typically grounds maintenance falls like that, that's a part.
Yeah.
And, you know, you start putting people down in public works, then they start doing other work, and so I think that the public works guy doesn't really have time to keep an eye on the parks. You know what I'm saying? He's got.
If you were to drop them over there, you would,
He's a
yeah,
working foreman.
how's he gonna maintain?
He's got 2 more people to take care of, and you know, I'm not gonna say he doesn't care about parks, but his priority is roads and crews and equipment and stuff like that, so it is a bit different. Typically, you do see these kinds of expenses in the parks budgets.
So I as well looked at it off the whole budget number, and then at our last meeting, when Diane and Sam were there, that's when I questioned a little bit about what exactly they do, and what are they doing. I know there's a lot that, we call it the rec department, and we don't really refer to it as parks, rec, and maintenance, and I think that is a big part of it. Whereas if you could break that down, it's probably a little easier to justify its number as a whole. I'm okay with that budget at this point. just wish it was broken down a little bit better than what we see here. I think, at least for the rec department itself, would probably be more fair, and then maybe parks and maintenance on its own. I don't know, just,
It's a tracking
as far as
thing.
budget review wise, maybe to separate so we get a clear image and,
I think that it's hard to do that in the sense that if you're gonna ask to split out the labor costs.
cause they're going all over all the time.
You're assigning it, you're creating new accounts.
Yeah.
And you're gonna fund those separately, and then you're gonna create a whole new tracking system, you know, well, in payroll, that just creates another level of work, and so to the extent that I think we can satisfy your questions by providing you an aside detail like we provided to you, so you can see how those expenses are split out. But when you start splitting it out in a budgetary
Thank you.
fashion like that,
What?
it's gonna be a little bit of work. And I think it's counterintuitive to what we wanna try to do, right? We don't wanna create more work, you know? While, if we're just trying to save money, so.
So the reason why I say I'm okay with this budget right now is there's a breakdown later on that we didn't have prior to, that we
Right,
talked
once
about
we
that
got
last
that,
meeting.
it's like, oh, okay.
And I think that's why, when you look at that overall number, you're like, what in the world is going on? But there's a revised camp fee to break even, right, that's provided here. And I think that number is more realistic in the future. I think that's where the board needs to look at to, and I hate to say justify this budget, but essentially that's what it is, because it's all wrapped into one. But I think what has been being, what the fee was in the past versus this, because we talked about at the last meeting, the cost of the labor to run those other programs was not included in those particular costs. So the actual break-even point was not what we thought it was. We knew that there was something off, and I think that's probably more realistic. So I don't know how you address it here. So for me, I would say I'm okay with this budget. Fee structure for the rec program needs to be looked at and adjusted. Because right now, the shortfall is paying, it's falling on the taxpayers. It really is. So
So let me just say that if we had 100 people sign up for camp, okay, and we double the cost of the camp, that's 10 grand. It doesn't get you anywhere, so where I think you feel better about things, and so, but it goes back to what I was saying, is that if you're gonna see people drop off, as the rates go up, you're gonna see percentage, I don't know what that is,
right,
but you're gonna see that number of enrollment go down. And so, I guess, I kinda talked about what's that sweet spot, right, where you don't get that, you can't necessarily poll your clients, because they're not gonna tell you they'd be okay with paying more. But, you know, if we try to increase our rates, if you will, and I think there's room to move on that,
that's what I'm saying.
okay, that, you know, if we bring it up $100 and we lose half the people,
They've gained nothing.
we're gaining nothing.
Exactly.
And you're still gonna have pretty much as much staff, close to as much staff as you had. So you've really lost nothing, you really gained nothing at all, you've hurt the department in that sense. I think that moving forward, we need to, build in rate increases, increment over time, so that we can kind of stay on top of the expenses. And it's not gonna feel as bad if from one year to the next it goes up 15 or 20 bucks. But, you know, I agree, I mean, summer camp, for $100, it's a steal.
Steal.
It's, I mean, you don't get,
Babysitter.
I mean, you spend more than that
To
on
play
it.
devil's advocate to that, just to throw this out there, and I'm on the same page, I'm the one, you know, who kind of questioned this to begin with, and started this whole thing, but, with the rates, wanting to know side of that, is you have to be mindful of the person who may be a single mom working 2-3 jobs, who has 3 or 4 kids, and do you wanna price her right out of being able to have her kids have rec?
Correct.
Because as a community, we also have a social responsibility
That's correct.
to take care of our kids.
No, but we may
So-
not be pricing her out there, but we may price her out on taxes.
That's right, so you have to
So-
find that,
You know what I
the
mean?
balance of where we need to be, so it's definitely, I know what I would like to see going forward is a little more, I guess not to add, so much work to Diane over there, but I think she does most of it already. I'd like a little more information, ongoing or for the next budget for sure, about what is spent where and why, so that when we're asked these questions, you don't even think about like the fuel for the lawnmowers for the Four Seasons, or for, the tires for the vehicle that Gerald needs to go and do the lights, and that's all rec department expenses
Yeah.
that we don't see, so to be able to talk to a taxpayer and they say, oh, we're spending $500,000 on rec, well, no, this is everything we're doing, and it's really good to have that information. So, I don't know.
That's why I think I'm okay with the budget. I just think the fee structure for the rec program needs to be looked at, that's all. That would be my position.
Oh, you're writing that part down on,
Well,
That's for me. I don't know how
What do
you
you-
feel.
I'm okay with the budget. It's an attractive, like, I know Jason mentioned this before, it's there to attract
Of course.
families, and that's what we wanna do, so I think cutting anything here significantly is not.
It's not gonna help us.
No.
mm-mm.
Not in the long run. You need it's a balance, right? There's a balance to attract people here and keep people here versus pricing everybody out so they won't go there at all. So there is a balance there. I know you just kind of mentioned to it, and I don't know what that is, but I think there's room for improvement there.
As
And
far as the tent fees, can you have written on here, renting tents or whatever,
In my opinion, we shouldn't be in the tent
well,
business, period.
that was addressed with the board when I first came on, and those fees had been restructured, and then they don't go out to where they used to go before, and it had been restructured so that it does cover, the
Your
cost for
fares.
that, and then, I understand, like, getting rid of, you're saying, kinda getting rid of the tents, but you have so many events that use them.
No, I'm not
and-
saying get rid of tents and use them for town purposes, and not have to pay employees to go set them up for Joe's wedding and Tom's reception, and we're paying employees to do that, and we're paying, medical, we're paying all their benefits, everything. That's a big job. You watch them put up a tent, several hours there,
Yeah.
tear down,
I
pick
think
it up.
you guys incorporated all that into the fee though, right? No?
Yeah, I think we're break even right now.
It was
Yeah.
adjusted this year,
We
correct?
adjusted,
Yeah, we just did.
It just happened.
there was no way that going as far as we were that we could ever
No.
break even, but I think collapsing the area or reducing the area that we serve, and adjusting our fees got us to a break even point. So I think the goal is to not lose money with it right now. The goal is to just have it there as a resources for the community,
I do know without those, the Acadian Festival struggle for sure, I can tell you that much, and I know like some of the other community, and that's where
No,
it's
it's not.
hard, because there's some community events that, that supports.
I'm not saying get rid of the tent.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
no,
what, sorry,
no,
that's why I misunderstood that, right
No.
here, it
Yeah.
said completely cut tent supply budget.
Yeah. Completely cut the budget, and if somebody needs a tent, go to the rec center and get it for the town.
So
Put
you're
it
just
up.
saying cut the budget of putting
Yeah,
them
we've
up.
also gotta have a reserve of 7,000 and a this and a that, and I don't think we should be in the tent business.
I think it takes an experienced team to set up tents. I don't think that having anybody
Well, then,
just going in there willy-nilly and grabbing our
be
tents.
good business for somebody.
Yeah, but I think if you're doing business for somebody, that you'd probably see $1,000, $750 a day rental fees for those things, and nobody would pay that much money.
That's just my opinion.
I get it. And then,
But it
and I'm
doesn't
not-
mean we can't like revisit it and say, okay, if we are gonna rent them out, then we need to make money with them a little bit. And then, just if a business in town starts renting tents, then we have to stop, cause we don't wanna compete, but, I mean, Ken has a point that we could look at,
Oh, yeah.
for
Absolutely.
sure.
I mean, while they're putting up tents, they're not mowing lawns in our parks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're saying they're wide open.
Right, it's not like it used to be though, trust me, it was,
Yeah.
It's not that
for a
many.
while there, it was like,
Well, this year's probably less than it's been in a long time.
yeah, but I mean, it slowed down after we brought the size, and that coincided also with COVID, but we were way too far, I mean, half a day to go,
Oh, yeah,
you know, trucks on the road and
Yeah, I know.
expenses and that,
Big job.
So that's something we should look at, like if we're just breaking even, then maybe Ken's right, and the board should be looking at, like, why are we even renting them? I thought the new fee structure was,
Well, I say we're breaking even. When I say breaking even, I mean, we're not losing money right now with that, but we have those guys on staff, right? So it's not like we're tracking, okay, 3 hours to go set up the tent, so
Right.
how much do those 3 hours cost, right? And so if we're looking at it that way, no, I mean, we're lucky to break even. But if we're looking at it from the sense that these people are on staff anyway, we still have a little bit of time that we can go out there and do these things in that short, I mean, we're talking.
Most of that is
Summer.
for community events, are we doing a lot of rentals beyond community events with that right
Oh, we
now?
got weddings
We
and
did last week.
receptions and,
So I'm not
First.
aware.
And we used them last week.
Yeah, we did, yeah. But to me, that's supporting the community, I still think it's, you're talking.
Then
So I think you're right, I'm okay with this budget, but I still think that we should have the fee structure for the rec program looked at, and it's probably not a bad idea to revisit the tent thing, and let's make sure that
I mean,
it makes sense still.
well, let them make a little money so that they can replace their tractor when they need to.
Exactly.
There you go.
There should be,
Okay.
exactly, there should be a
There you go.
return on that somewhere.
a little bit.
There should be a return on that somewhere, I agree.
I mean, why run programs that are not gonna make anything? You're wasting your return.
Maybe we don't know, maybe there is right now, we don't have those numbers sitting here to realize it yet, but it's worth looking into at least.
What else, anybody with the rest?
I'm okay with the rest of
Is
it.
there anything on those fees of 10 rentals to make money and revisit if tent rental is feasible?
Yeah,
Okay, Ken?
and then the rec fees, right,
The rec fee, okay.
the remaining of the budget, are we?
so, no disco balls in the tents there, Ken?
No.
Okay, scratch, we're gonna take that out of the budget.
I just don't wanna do nothing that's gonna
No,
cost us.
Cost us
you know?
more.
Try to keep it fun here a little bit.
Yeah.
I've had a unique position over the past few years to know a little bit more about this than the average taxpayer. So like Ken, when he came in, he's completely doesn't know, he sees tents going out and what the heck are we doing renting tents here or there, or, there was a lot of parts of these budgets that I didn't understand, there's a lot that I did, but for the average taxpayer, they don't understand a lot of the expense or the justification behind them, so I think it's good that we talk about it, and then let the board do what they gotta do with it from there. It's our next one.
So we leave everything as is with the sign.
Yep. Yep. That's what it sounds like to me. Townwide insurance,
I will point out for you that there was a big reduction in the workers' comp. Our renewal, our policy, it starts in September,
okay,
and our mod rate went down. So that was a $17,000 reduction in our workers' comp premium.
That's since our last meeting that we
Yes.
were at, yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
Our PNC, property and all other insurances is an April 1 renewal, policy, and our workers' comp is, September 1. So as long as our staff stays healthy, you don't get injured in the workplace.
That's
great.
gamble anywhere.
You can see, look, if you go back to the 2017 budget, the first column,
Yep,
we're not far from there, we're actually less than that,
yep,
back in 2017.
yeah, not by much. So, given I don't have a ton of knowledge, I'm okay with
There's
that.
nothing,
I mean,
yeah,
there's
there's
not much
nothing
we
we
can
can
do
do
with
about
that,
it.
so. Intergovernmental expense, Department 710.
I'd like to recommend we fund from like the previous year, same amount, and not add an extra 5,000 to the chamber 700.
Say that one again.
On 700 chamber.
Oh, line
Right
700,
there.
okay.
I'd like to go back to the previous year's amount, which was, I believe, 765.
So I'm just gonna say a couple of things. The chamber took a hit this year with the top of the trade show not happening, so they lost a significant source of revenue, for that. So that's hurting them. The other thing that I wanna make you aware of is that we are working closely with the chamber right now, on a collaboration that would help the chamber sort of reinvent themselves a little bit in what they're doing, and we want them to be active in programming, to work, to not necessarily just be a directory for businesses and resources, but to be working collaboratively with the town to drive people into the town. So not programming and things, and we are, like I said, talking about a plan for putting things together that drives downtown development, that drives people into the municipality. So, it's not enough for us right now. Our comfort level, like I guess, is that they're asking for more money, we're asking them to do more. And what we're planning to do is have an agreement in place with them that sets the expectations. So it's not just gonna be, here's your assessment, here's your appropriation,
Do what you want, type of thing.
you know, and we'll see you next year. It's going to be, here's your appropriation, and you know, we have an agreement now with the chamber. It says, you expect this of us and we expect this of you. And if we're doing programming, whatever the things that we're thinking about doing, okay, to reinvent the chamber, we wanna be integral in that change. We think they can play an important part in driving the local economy to support our businesses in our town. But we need to be a little more modern and cutting edge and different and thinking outside the box.
Is the chamber just work for our town?
They don't, Ken, and we've discussed that.
But do the other communities give money to
A little
her?
bit.
A little bit,
But
not
like
what we
this.
do there.
Not like this.
Okay.
And then listen, that's something that we talked about, and I remember you mentioned it, and I said,
Yeah.
one of the concerns is, you know, our lift, we're making a heavy lift here, compared to the other communities. Are they gonna do more? And I think that we're gonna have to address that somehow. I'm not sure how we get there, other than to say that if there's stuff that we are doing locally with the chamber, that it's benefiting here locally, okay? And if the other communities see something that they're like, well, why not us? The chamber can turn around and say, well, the town's collaborating with us and they're giving us more resources to make things happen. So if you want some of that,
Pay up.
jump on board.
So, I hear what Ken was saying, I understand what you're saying, so, for a lack of better terms, can I sum it up by saying basically, there's an increase in that line item, kind of as kind of a pilot project to work with the new parks and things like that, to try to get some growth.
Absolutely.
Well, I have very little faith in programs like that in the park and, sprucing up storefronts, and I haven't seen results.
Parks are, we've been working to get our parks done. We have COVID to deal with right now.
Right.
What we're thinking about doing is new. What we're thinking about doing is going to be, it's not just that we're gonna put on an activity and 85 people come down and that was fantastic. It's going to be, well, we're gonna, whatever we try to do, we wanna be able to quantify the success, okay? How many people did we drive into the downtown? How many people went shopping? How many businesses were open?
How many stores do they have to show?
And so, our collaboration is not just going to be with the chamber, but it's going to be with the chamber and the businesses, and the historical societies, and the Boy Scouts, and the Girl Scouts, and the boosters, and all that thing. I think it's community building, if you will. And being able to go back and measure a year from now and say, did it work? And have some tangible data to say, look, our $15,000 and whatever we did with the rec department supporting in our offices, you know, if we were able to come back and say, hey, you know, this generated this much traffic and we brought this amount of people into our downtown, and businesses saw an uptick that we can verify, then this makes this discussion that much easier for the next budget process. But we have to try something. We have to try something, and that's what we're trying to do.
And so when I look at that, I look at, you know, when we talk about downtown and the parks that are there, whether I'm in support of those or not, at this point, we have 2 brand new parks. And whether I support them or not, we got them. And do we wanna just let them sit there, or do we wanna make an attempt to make them successful? So I think it would be short-sighted at this point to spend the money that we spent on parks and not allow for some way to try to put some programming down there to make it successful. That's how I see it. Do I think that the chamber's always been successful for its duties here? Probably not. You know, when I owned my business and I was part of the chamber, did I see any benefit to myself? Maybe not. But I don't see where we can just not make an attempt, I guess, and for me, I don't see it's that, we're talking pennies at this point, I guess, compared to the overall picture. We're already in it so deep, but.
I mean, we used to fund them at 20,000.
And she brought that information forward, so.
When labor was cheaper and expenses were cheaper.
I get it.
You know, and there's high expectations placed upon them, and, you know, they have very little to work with. You know,
I
very
agree.
limited hours, and so it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, you know, it's either somebody donates all their time, or they get a big boost in membership, and all of a sudden there's an influx of revenue there, they can make something happen, but, you know, the memberships are waning, and I think under the chamber model, you know, it needs to be a little different.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they can be different, but we need to put some people together and be innovative and try something out.
I'm okay with this budget. That's where I'm at. No. Ken?
I'm gonna go with him.
Tiebreaker.
Yeah, I said if it was split, that I was gonna go with the people that wanted it discussed by the board and,
So what are we gonna propose here, that
that they don't get the,
reduce it, leave it,
So we're in favor of leaving it at.
no increase,
No increase.
right? That would be, cause the proposal is,
Correct.
the proposal is
Yeah, no,
15.
it would be 5,000.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's right.
What can I do to whip you guys on board? What can I say?
You know where I have a sticky point? If you could correct that, I think I'd be a little bit,
Give me a chance, what is it?
the chance would be, nobody can guarantee me that that's gonna be for my community. It could be for Senegal. It could be for somebody else the chamber's representing. It could be. There are no guarantees.
Well.
You know what I'm saying?
Let me suggest this.
Yeah, I do.
There's no
I hear what
guarantees
you're
that
saying.
$15,000
I
of
understand.
a Madawaska taxpayer money is gonna be, nobody's guaranteeing me that.
That it's only for that. and
Correct,
nowhere
it
else.
could be going to some other community.
So give him, let's see what he's got. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
This is-
Fire away.
this is
Now, this
fine.
is it, you got your
This is
chance,
fine.
man.
So, does the 15,000 make them more viable to be there for other communities? Absolutely, okay? But I'm gonna be down there so much, working with them to work for us, that I'm gonna have their full attention, and they're gonna be working a lot for us. And I think, you know, not to minimize other communities, I've worked for other communities, and I know the other businesses there. But, you know, the lion's share of the work is here. It's on us, okay, in our agreement with them to say, this is what we're asking for. Are you ready? And if you can commit, then we're in. And so,
Yeah.
at the end of this, if it didn't work out, if we didn't get what we asked for, if the tangibles weren't there, well, you know, next year's a different year. Have I convinced you, my friend?
So I'm gonna go back to, the only reason why I'm justifying this one is because I'm chalking up this kind of a pilot project. Without it, what do we have? Nothing. With it, we have an attempt for that amount of money. I feel, okay, I'll swallow it this year, but I know I'm gonna be sitting here on next year's budget, so I can look at that and say, next year, you know what? I remember you saying we were gonna try it, and if it didn't work, well, you know, Gary, there goes your budget. So that's
So Chris,
why.
you voted to increase. Adam, you voted to increase?
Yes.
Or you voted to increase?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So
You didn't vote, you're staying.
He was
I'm,
trying
well,
to.
yeah, because you're split, that you want the board to look at it, then I feel like there's no reason the board can't look at it. Or see that your recommendation
Well-
was that it was split, so.
What can I
He's
do?
he's trying to persuade you guys to go on.
I've seen too many failures, too many promises that weren't kept. I'm not gonna change my mind.
And I'm
But
gonna
never an agreement in writing.
Huh?
But never an agreement in writing with the chamber, we're gonna have one.
I'm gonna stick with Joel because of past experience. He's been around to see what's been going on, so I'm gonna stick with
I
that.
bet you that some of these businesses that had town funding to improve their storefront, I bet you that some of these are closed. You know,
Okay, so the
But that's
facade,
different.
Same
the
thing.
That's
facade
different.
program, just so we know.
Yes, I know, but
Yeah.
still,
Those didn't get awarded yet there, those applications are
right,
just
right.
But it does,
starting to.
But what I'm saying is that it's
That
on
could've-
similar lines.
Mm.
We're gonna bring in people.
it doesn't hurt to bring it to
Right.
the board members for
No.
them to look at. That's all we're asking. That's fair. I
I'm good
think
with
that's
that.
fair.
I think it's
Okay,
fair.
Let them
it
look
is
I mean, that's
fair.
what you guys are here for.
That's right. I think it's fair to.
It's been here a long time.
Yeah, he's got experience. in
I'm
it.
still saying I'm okay with it, but if he,
That doesn't mean
you know, so this one, we're gonna recommend the budget stays the same as last year, basically, for that they review it further. Is that correct? How'd you write that down?
Yeah, reduce from
Well,
keep the $10,000 to,
I don't think you can say the whole budget, cause there's things in the budget that have changed.
From, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
right,
see
just
what
make
you're
sure you
saying.
just write chamber.
Chamber, you're
Yeah,
talking about the
okay,
chamber
yeah,
only.
You
right.
can't,
Yeah.
like, obviously you can't touch the county tax.
There-
County tax went up, you
Yeah,
have no choice
And then you
about
can't
that.
touch VRF, and you
went
can't
up.
touch the
No.
airport.
no, I'm just
But
gonna
everything,
specify.
hydrant rental you can't touch,
Right.
No, no.
streetlights you can't touch. Well, no, you can, but that's, yeah.
The Acadian Festival, that's already been touched.
Yeah, we took that one
Yeah.
out this year.
I'm okay with the rest of that one.
Moving on. Anything else on 710? You? No? Social Services Department, or I should say Social Service Expense Department, 720. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
This one, I don't wanna hurt the Legion, but just because I'm the one who offered the information out, I want to correct myself.
Okay.
The $700 for the decorations, I had been informed and had information that it was because they put up the flags on Main Street, so we agreed to pay. But I found out that the rec department
Rec
actually
department.
puts all those flags up, right?
Well, I think what you're alluding to, Rory, is that they put up the flags on the Veterans Grave on the.
Oh, yes, okay, good, I just wanna make sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I hadn't given like false information,
Right.
and, but you're right,
But it was kind of
and
a
that's what it was.
trade-off.
Yep,
They'll supply the flags and we.
that's what it was.
Okay.
Okay,
So that's an
Gotcha.
offsetting expense, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
agreement
It's a
that's been in
trade-off.
place for a
Yeah.
long time.
Gotcha.
It's a trade-off.
Okay,
Gotcha.
that's what that is, good.
I understand. Main Acadian Heritage Trail. I don't even know what it is. We didn't have any information on that on the last meeting, huh?
No, that was supposed to get you.
They're not here to request that in person. Got it.
Who does that money go to?
I don't
Where
know,
are you?
I can check.
You don't know where it's in it.
Okay.
St. John Valley Associates, I'm okay with that. Rustic Agency on Aging, I'm okay with that.
I still struggle with
Go
the
ahead.
Historical Society one, that big giant increase.
Hold on, that's at the bottom. Go
Oh,
down
sorry.
there.
Am I too fast for you?
Yeah, you're moving fast. American Red Cross, any? Good, I'm okay with it. Aroostook County Action Program, that, I can tell you that comes back to us a couple fold there throughout the
No,
course
it's
of the
not.
year, quite easy. Homeless Services of Aroostook. Northern Maine Vet Cemetery. So, how about this? What do you have for changes that you'd like to see on this particular thing?
I just find that the Historical Society hit us a little bit hard this year. She gave a great speech and everything, but geez, we can't put everything on the taxpayers every time something, happens. I mean, planning ahead probably would have prevented this a little bit.
Well, I think they got behind.
Yeah, and what do you do when the people there prior to you didn't plan ahead and then you take over
Yeah.
and you're stuck with that?
Yeah, well,
That's kind of what,
They got behind and now they're trying to take over and get their feet
I
underneath
know.
them.
yeah,
And their request next year is not gonna look anything like this, it's gonna be less than this, but they're paying for
yeah.
their roof project
Yeah.
and then to have some operating money.
They've had many years without even making it.
Yeah.
Well, they used to get some funding.
Oh, they
That
got,
Well, they used to get other funding,
Okay.
oh, yeah, they got funding.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
but those
Oh, yeah.
funding sources have dried up.
Got it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And they talked, Frank talked about, their lifetime membership drives and how that's
Yeah.
hurting them now and so,
No, I
and I
really,
think part of what we're trying to do with the programming and getting them in the downtowns with us, to help us with programming, so that they can recruit, members, and then maybe recruit interest in the historical, and maybe, that's how you bring about an awareness of them, and that's part of the effort that we're trying to do.
and you're stuck, right? Cause if you don't help them fix the
yeah,
roof, you gotta help them find a place to put all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to some people, that stuff is garbage, and to other people, like, those are family heirlooms and
Yeah.
history, and
yeah.
so what do you do with the stuff?
We were entrusted that when it was
Right.
given to them, that it was gonna be taken care of.
But
Right.
hopefully, it won't be as big every year.
Yeah.
Right?
This amount here, Ken, is partially, well,
It's more,
95% of it's my fault, because she had come, she was only asking for 8.
Yeah,
She was asking for 8 in the very first meeting that she ever came to with
Yep.
us to fix the roof. And when the discussion started and they said, we had 4,000 in our account, we got a grant for 4, we emptied our account, And then they started talking about, well, they still have electric bills and insurance and all this other stuff. I said, well, if you, now you're at zero, how are you gonna get that back to where you need it to be? So I said, we should put a line item in there to give them back therefore, so they have their operating money to pay, cause you need insurance, and if you go down the cross site and someone breaks a leg, and like
Yep.
it's, I mean, it's just things like that, so that number really, was my big mouth that, that got
No, I'm good,
from 8 to,
I'm good.
11, it really should have been 12, but, I mean, they're not asking for the whole floor back, and.
I'll tell you the only changes I want, two things that I see on, as is proposed. The $200 for the paws animal welfare should be scratched off to zero, that $200 should move up to bring the, Northern Maine Vet Cemetery. We're giving $200 to animals and $100 to our veterans. Disgusting to me, it's absolutely disgusting to me. I think, there's plenty of
That's all
opportunity.
they asked for.
That's okay, but I think we can do better than that. I look at that. I am a veteran, I mean, that's sad to me. It's actually ridiculous, really, you know. I understand that's all they asked for, but at the same time, there's probably not a lot of people in that cemetery able to come up here and ask for more money to help maintain the grounds that they're laying in. So,
I'm okay with that.
personally, I don't see where we need to support animal welfare. I think there's plenty of programs out there, I think there's plenty of opportunities for that, whereas the other one, I don't feel so. And I do not support the Long Lake Water Quality Association.
No, I
Sorry.
don't support that one at all either, because
I
the other
have a very hard
communities aren't
time.
sharing into that.
I only don't support that because I don't understand what is the benefit. They get some air readings, they take that down, they come back, what is that gaining Madawaska? What is that gaining us? What are we getting out of that? We just know what kind of water oxygen concentration's in there? What is that
It's
doing?
measured water quality and it goes into the database, and if
So,
things
is that a
happen and then,
I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I just
don't think
that we can
Madawaska
be funding
taxpayers
that.
should pay the whole tab, and right
No,
now,
I
that's what
agree.
we're doing.
Yeah, that's where I'm
I agree.
struggling.
Yep.
I think there was mention of one of the communities that offered up a portion
The fishing.
contingent
offered up
that they got the
$500,
remaining
but it
balance.
was contingent upon them getting additional funding to make the purchase.
I think that's where we should be at. I'd be okay with a small support of that, but it's gotta be contingent on the other
Yeah, yeah,
communities helping. I just,
we can't always.
I don't
foot the bill.
understand the big benefit of that for one, and maybe that's that association's fault for not coming and actually explaining what the result of that provides them, or what it does for us as a community. But right now, just to say for $2,000 to get some testing equipment does nothing for this guy. Sorry, I just don't have
I
it.
don't see the benefit
Don't
for
get
the
it.
taxpayer either.
So I don't know how I know you're somewhat in the same
I'm in the
place
same
they
boat
are.
as you.
I am, I don't know.
On that one, I'm on the same boat.
No, I don't wanna fund it.
Next.
Can we go back to,
Go
well,
ahead.
okay, wait, this, what are you guys deciding on this water quality thing?
The four of us, I'm okay with not doing it all, or there's gotta be a different arrangement where it's contingent on a smaller, a much lesser amount if they were to get the rest of it, but to me, that's just,
You could recommend 0 and then tell them if they get the rest from the other town in the next budget, you could put it in. Or you could put 500 like the Derby did, and,
contingent upon,
how much
The only
was the
thing is
total
that-
they
is that-
needed?
Uh-huh.
What was the total that they really needed, was it 2,500? And so the Derby, so
Yeah.
it was 2, so
No,
they're,
no, it's 25, I believe.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
what I don't know is, what's hard for me on this one is if they've gone to other towns, there's nothing built in this that says we give them 2,000, they got 500 from the ice fishing derby, and other towns have given another 2,000, they got $6,000-7,000 for a $2,000 piece of equipment.
So they come to us because it's a Long Lake Water Quality Association, it's the people from Lakeshore Road, Green Point area, so they're fairly active, they came to their community. Okay, so that's why they're coming
I
here first.
understand that.
The only reason why they went to the Derby, because I thought maybe the Derby could get, the Derby has supported stuff
Okay.
in the past, and I thought that's something that the Derby could get behind, because water quality is essential for, you know, good recreational fishery on Long Lake, so, for one thing, so anyway, but, you know, the Derby wasn't gonna do the whole thing. And their approval was contingent upon them getting additional funding to make the purchase. So the only thing about us is if we say, well, you know, we'll give you 500 contingent, if they don't produce that, you know, if they don't make that happen before June 30, then that money's just gonna roll into the surplus. You know, it's like it almost have to be there as an aside in a reserve account, so that eventually when they do get all of their funding pieces, that it would be there. Otherwise, you know, this money will,
Sit there.
well, it's not gonna sit there.
It'll go away.
If at the end of June 30, they weren't able to come up with the difference, then, you know, we're not gonna give it to them, and it's just gonna flow into the fund balance.
I was thinking, I don't wanna fund them. That's my recommendation.
I'm okay with that. You had another question on something
Yeah,
else?
I don't have any problem if you, I mean, the Veterans Cemetery asked for only 100, I have no problem if you say you wanna give them 500, cause now this 2,000 is gone. But I just wanna keep in mind that Paws takes in a lot of cats from Madawaska. I think that, we're one of the towns that they get the most from, and when there are stray cats and cats, like, what are we gonna do with them? You don't, you know, I know a lot of people say you just take them out and shoot them, but, like, you want Gary to start shooting the cats, like, come on. So I just want you to be aware that they do a lot for Madawaska, so, you know,
Okay.
I have an issue with the whole social service thing, cause I feel
I do.
like if community members want to give donations to these things, then they should give their donation, and it shouldn't be up to us, but, the more research I've done on this, the more, like, you know, many communities have this type of department, so it's not, you know, just us. I certainly, I'm
I
all
only
for
target-
cuts, but I don't think $200 is hurting us to give to someone that helps us out a lot, to be
So,
honest. Why don't you?
are we giving him $200 to help take care of a problem that we have that we could fix other ways, like education or something, versus just saying, let's just keep sending cats, cause we keep having more cats? I mean, the cats aren't gonna stop having more cats, we know that, we've been having cats for years and years.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I'm saying?
I
So,
know.
because we have a problem with cats, we're gonna just keep shelling
I'm
$200
gonna
to
give you
take care of
guys
our
Jean
cats.
Cobb's, when Jean Cobb calls me, the one that she takes care of Paws,
Yes,
I'm gonna give her all your phone numbers.
that's fine, maybe
Because
Paul should
that-
be, well, this is why
That
these
lady
people,
is very, very dedicated to the cause.
and that's
she's
absolutely
very
fine, but
thorough.
if she was that dedicated, I would've had her information here, and she would've come to talk to me about why she wanted to.
Well, yeah, but you gotta, we started our budget process in February, and
I've been here every day, she hasn't come once.
Well, I know, but I didn't ask her to come.
Well, that's your fault now.
No, but I asked you, is there anybody you wanna bring back here, other than historical?
I don't
said,
wanna
"No."
bring anybody, it's up to them, I mean, they're the ones asking for the money, right?
She's gonna use $200 in gas coming here to talk to you for the $200.
So,
And pick up 5 cats on the way back.
I mean, if we have that problem, I have a problem with cats, I mean, maybe we should be doing more than just sending $200 to the shelter, I don't know. Huh?
We're going into winter and the cats are gonna sleep outside.
Listen, I got 2 cats, and my cats haven't had more cats, so there's a way to prevent this stuff, man. Okay, we'll leave those alone.
So we're crossing that out. We're
It's
leaving
gonna
that.
cost us more to argue that point than
Yeah.
200.
I know.
You guys,
We'll just-
do what you wanna do there.
Next time I have cats, I'm not gonna get them neutered, I'm just gonna have more cats and send them to Fort Canada. Is that what it is? Fort Canada?
Oh, is that what that is?
I'm thinking that there's more of an educational opportunity
Okay.
there, that's all.
Well,
No,
we'll,
I agree.
You know what I'm
leave it
saying?
there.
I agree, I just wanted to make the point that, you know,
Good point,
she's
I'll take it.
helping us
The rest
a
of
lot.
them, I understand those particular social services, and I know what the return is on
So what do you
those.
wanna do with the veteran cemetery one? Before you close this
So-
one out.
If everybody else in favor of leaving the pause, leave it as is, I'm okay with it, I just struggle. But, it's okay.
Well, no.
That's
you
only
can-
me.
you
What
can-
about that $2,000?
You're cutting 2,000.
I'm good with the 2,000 gone, but now we're taking off,
Yeah,
right?
maybe you could add a little bit more to the gift from the cemetery? No?
No, okay.
We good?
Move on.
Nine?
7:30,
It's not 7:30.
municipal debt expense. I don't suppose this is an area where we have much opportunity to make adjustments, so for me, I'm good. Unless you wanna go renegotiate the truck lease or something, I don't know.
We could default on some of the,
Yeah, no, pay the bill.
Yeah, that'll work well in the long run. Department 960, pollution control, again, I'm okay with that.
I only put, reduced travel because it's my thing to do.
And that comes under your whole,
Yeah,
Thing of-
yeah, trying to reduce the travel costs.
I would assume that that's probably also high on the, training, I would suspect. Did a really good job presenting the budget and explaining that though.
Yeah.
Mark, very thorough.
Very good job, man. But I'm okay with that, are you? Good,
Okay.
good.
Hey, we're running out.
We're getting there.
Moving on.
Capital purchases and reserves.
So I'm gonna, you
Talk
don't
to us.
see it here as a line item, but, we did get a quote for the,
Fire truck?
not yet,
What?
the,
generator,
Thingamajig.
and the
Oh,
grader, the grader.
Both of them?
the generator switch, the transfer switch.
Yes?
Which is a project that we've been putting off for a while, and
Yeah.
that puts a generator switch on the elementary school, and that is the emergency place, if there's an emergency in town, that's where people go. If there's power outages and stuff like that, so we bring a generator there, and we just plug it in. Transfer switches are there, right now we don't have that, and so we got a quote today, it was about $35,000.
44,300. You don't have to add all that together, or that's all separate, or that's all.
Let me look at that one.
Oh,
Um,
no, maybe I wanted to ask you, maybe you didn't have to add all that in to that? You have option one,
Well-
option two plus this,
Yeah.
so it's 44,300.
It's a lot of money for a transfer
Cost.
switch.
Yeah.
Was there multiple quotes given on that, and that's like
That's
a,
just one quote.
That was just for budgeting purposes.
It's a manual
I
one.
was, looking for that number
that's a
just to.
manual?
There's one there, right, this manual right
It's
now.
manual.
That's an automatic, or?
There's a, I took here.
It's 44,300.
The automatic is 44,300, the manual's, 3,000 less or something, 2,000 less. 2,500 less. That's for budgeting purposes. Cause I've been questioning this, I mean, we all have, because my concern was that, over the years, things have just kind of, I mean, we know, like, the
Yep.
grader needs work, the fire trucks, the sprinkler system, the tractor, the wreck. Now we've got our emergency management person sitting in front of us saying he's concerned about the emergency generator. We're supposed to have the elementary school, that's our shelter, and we don't know if the generator's gonna start,
That
like,
doesn't make
what are we doing?
Doesn't
For
make
me, it was public works and roads, cause we have to go someplace, and safety is our two biggest problems, right? So I was just pushing, hoping that, I would love to present the taxpayer with a 2 mil savings, but you give them a 2 mil savings and then their house burns down or they can't go, it doesn't make sense. So, I'm the one who asked to have that quote for the budget, cause I personally would like to try us to do something with that, and we have, feasibility study monies that we could transfer, we could play around with that stuff, but I'm gonna be asking the board if we can put this in the budget and address that, cause to me, that's a safety.
I
That's a-
agree, I
that's a
think it needs to be
concern.
taken care of,
Okay with
this, on this budget, I think it does need to be taken care of. I don't know if that's
The
the
quote,
one quote you go with,
No,
but
no, I
I
don't
think
think so,
for
that's
budgeting
not
but
what
purposes,
we're
it's
planning.
probably,
it's a good plan.
it's
I
probably
mean,
safe to base it off that,
We would have to go out to,
to be,
We go out to
We'll have
bid
to
and
get some
hopefully it would be
prices on
lower.
yeah.
I mean, our policy is, you
Mhm.
know, purchase policy, we kinda have to go out to bid. We
I
have a
think-
local bidding preference here, but
it's a need, I mean,
I'm with you, I think it's. So, as far as this goes, when we talk about item like this, cause this isn't a, we're okay with it or not, this is something that doesn't exist in a budget right now, right?
no.
So this is a recommendation,
Right, you would put it in the capital reserve
Mhm.
budget as a request.
No, I'm
and
not an
zero.
electrician, but we were talking about an auto switch and a manual switch.
Mhm.
Isn't a manual switch just as dangerous as an auto switch? Well, I mean, more dangerous than an auto switch?
well, the auto switch.
I mean, if you go there and.
oh, yeah,
The auto
I-
switch, there's nobody there.
to me, the
Yeah,
auto
that's-
switch would make far more sense.
Oh, yeah, for safety,
Yeah.
no doubt,
Well,
and
that's why I was-
convenience, I mean, kicks in,
That's why I was thinking that.
yeah, pulling
a
down the
manual-
lever is not.
Manual switch wasn't that much less.
And granted, I mean, the board, the rest of the board may not think this is
Right.
priority,
As-
and the
No, but-
taxpayer may not
Yeah, but still
care,
it's
but I'd like to
something that we have to.
offer it and say, listen, like, you know, make people aware that it's good every year, cut, but then
These things add up to us,
Mhm.
and they're there.
And it
things
catches
catch up,
up.
and if we
And
don't
it's here.
start taking care of a few things here and there, we're never gonna get it caught up.
Did you write something down already? What,
Well, I just wrote down for the auto generators switch and the price it costs and present it to the board.
I'm okay with that.
Is that okay?
Good with that, yep.
Good with that?
Yeah.
Something we need to take care of. What else did you have?
I wanted to, I wanna talk to the board about a grader. I think we were gonna, the grader quote was, I think, 200,000.
200,000 to rebuild it.
Can we build?
So Milton Caterpillar offers a rebuild program that comes with a warranty, and they also offer financing as well. So there's different options there to be considered as to what to do. So you do it, you pay for all of it all at once, or you lease, you do their whatever their finance plan is. Then you spread out that cost over a few years. You incur a little bit of finance charge with that. Those are the options.
Can we like group a few things together, is that possible to discuss? Instead of, cause it's gonna be tough this way, I think. My thought would be, since we have a healthy ambulance reserve, we could actually withdraw $378,000 from that account, which would leave that reserve 400,000 or 300. 400, it would still leave them $400,000 roughly. And we could actually fund the fire department 100 grand. We could fund the grader 100 grand. We could fund the roof repairs 100 grand, and we could put 78,000 in our undesignated fund.
So
I know you're gonna fight that one hard.
Here we
No,
come.
It's just a thought.
We
So
all
right now
have,
with our
I have opinions, you
with our
have opinions.
undesignated fund being in the negative territory right now, the only reason why we're cash flowing is because we're running off of the reserves. Well,
Okay.
not only, but what's
Okay,
helping
yeah.
us is that
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
running off those reserves from the pollution control department and the ambulance department and those
Okay.
other.
Yeah,
So that's going on all the time.
So the more we take out of those reserves,
yeah,
the more we hurt our ability to cash flow.
right, no, I
And so-
understand that.
Cash flow typically isn't a concern, but right now, and given what's going on and the fact that we're so late in our budget,
Right.
if not for that, we'd be borrowing money to operate. So, you know, the reserve account, that's sort of a second benefit of having
Backup.
reserve accounts. It's all in the same bank account.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they're separated out in our
divided, yeah.
accounting system. So I'm not, and then next year, if I can't duplicate that transaction, whoop, big tax increase, cause all of that revenue is not there anymore. And so you gotta.
For whatever you're offsetting by that
Right.
transfer.
So, I always say this, when you go to the to the undesignated fund, if it's there, you know, if it's available, or reserve accounts, if you can't duplicate that transaction the next year, and, you know, then that's a tax increase, assuming that you didn't reduce
Yeah.
spending somewhere
Right.
else.
But at the rate they're making money, we could probably do it again next year now.
Yeah, I know, I get it, I get it.
No, I know.
And that's
but-
where, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is be mindful that,
Yeah.
of what you're talking about tonight here, thinking about next year at the same
Yeah.
time, because it does have a bearing on next year's budget.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're right.
I'm sure it does.
In the long run.
Right.
It does, I'm sure.
So so I guess we can just kind of throw out cause I think we're all very similar on what we're looking at.
Is there a way to do it, to remove some of the funding from that account, from that?
So we don't,
I
we've
mean,
done it before.
without it screwing us for next year? And maybe help other departments that
We've
aren't
done
doing
it,
as
we've
well?
done it before, I think that we just can't take too big of a bite.
Would it be possible for you to come up with a recommendation to give to the board?
I think that 200 would be about as much as I would wanna go
Okay.
on the ambulance reserve. Only because I don't know what it's gonna look like next year. And if you can't do the same thing next year,
Yeah.
then you're looking for revenue or cut expenses to mitigate, and so,
But I'm still surprised at 200,000 that you were able to.
yeah, and we've done that, we've done 150 in the past, we didn't do it last year, but we did it two previous budget years. And again, if not for those reasons, next year's budget, mindful of what, you know, how, that might make it hard for us next year on the revenue side of the budget,
Right.
and make that causing a or tax increase.
No, we definitely don't wanna
Right.
impose issues on next year's.
So what kind of, let me ask you this, what kind of decrease would you leave this what kind of decrease would you be comfortable with? What could you feel good about?
Well,
Because you can't do 3 mil.
Are you talking about over an overall budget
Over an
decrease?
overall budget, if the budget came
Oh.
back and we went to the taxpayer and said, we're gonna give you 500,000, 3/4 mil, 1 mil, you know, whatever, I mean, are you guys looking for a flat budget, a 1 mil decrease, like, what are you?
For me personally, anytime somebody says you can reduce my bill, I'm gonna be all for it. But the reality is, I think if we try to drop 2-3 mils,
Well, we can't do that.
next year, we're gonna go right back up,
That's
right? So
illogical.
the best thing that we can do is stabilize our budget. I don't wanna pay any more taxes than anybody else does out there, but in the long run, looking not just at this year, if you look at just this year, we're gonna be in trouble next year and the year after. I have two major concerns that I think need to be addressed beyond that generator. Actually, there's three for me. I think our two biggest priorities, one is that grader needs to be fixed. I don't think there is any question of a doubt. We probably should have done it prior to talking about it now. It should have been done last cycle, to be honest with you. I don't know what's gonna happen this winter. It seems to me that we can't take that out of service right now for this winter. And so even if you said, we got 200,000 for you to go fix your grader, that could break this winter and we're up to $320,000 to fix that thing. We don't know what's gonna
If we
happen.
damage it,
Right.
it's gonna cost more.
So we're already at taking a chance, you know, everybody's holding on to a wishbone and wherever she goes, she goes. I think that grader needs to get addressed and it needs to be figured out somehow very rapidly out of this budget cycle, it really does. Whether that's all in one chunk, I would hope that we could do that, and I'll give my opinion on that. And then the other portion of that is our fire department is struggling, and if we don't fix what we have with them, it's only gonna get worse. We're gonna be in the same position we are with our grader. We're not already there with them as well. So I don't, it appears to me overall, there's a couple budgets that might even be underfunded based off the fact that they don't have any reserve accounts. They don't have anything going in there to say, in the event that my grader breaks, or in the event that my fire truck isn't gonna last another year, they have nothing to dip into. And now you're down here scraping pennies and trying to figure out how you're gonna rob Peter to pay Paul. That's essentially what we're gonna do. So,
I would recommend that Gary's stated that it's possibly $200,000 taken out of that account, and maybe let the board decide which is the best out of those three things, the roof, the fire truck, and let them.
Well, the fire truck is a year away,
Yeah,
so when
So
we
we're
tell them
okay
to
with
build
that.
it's a year out.
So we'd be better off investing in our grader?
And
well, you're not gonna move the fire truck down the road if the grader
the
is
fire
broken.
truck is a discussion
so even.
for another time, and I think that it's probably going to be on the town's warrant this year to authorize,
For next.
you know, to go get the financing and get, to make it come.
A lease to own.
But it's not gonna be something that's gonna hit our budget in this fiscal year.
So let me back up.
Or
I already
possibly might
understood
not
that
even hit
one.
the next fiscal year,
Right.
possibly.
I understood that one. When I'm talking about the fire department, if I'm under the understanding, there's 2 pumps.
That's in here,
Is that in that budget?
that's right there, yeah.
Okay, so then really we're down to the grader, right? And then my third concern, and I don't know, I guess based off of priority,
You can only have two.
well, no, listen, you're gonna get 3 today. The other concern I have is the suppression system at the rec. It's clearly an expense, you can deny it this year and do it next year, but it's, what, $100,000 project?
Yeah, I think
So, I don't know how in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things, you figure that out, but I think it needs to be, a plan needs to be put forth in this cycle to make sure that you're ready for that, because I don't, you know,
So there's 2 ways to do what we're thinking that we should, I think we all agree that we need to do more. We have a fleet in the fire department, we have a fleet in public works. I mean, if you take all of our vehicles that we have and all of our equipment, we have a very big fleet. And we got away from financing, putting money in, back after '08 there, that all stopped. All that, you know, that fiscal planning and long-term planning went away, because those are the easy things to stop funding, right? $200,000 for that, well, we'll get rid of that this year, and then try bringing it back. So, I don't know that, I think to get back on a good, we started replacing equipment, and you can see it in your debt service.
Yep.
If you look,
Yep.
what we have we started replacing equipment in public works. We didn't have the money to do it, we have to finance. I think to get back to a good place is gonna be a mixture of both starting reserve accounts, you know, it's in a grader like we're planning on doing, and there's gonna be some financing that's gonna have to take place. We're not gonna be able to fund it all. You know, your financing will be able to spread it out over time, and your reserve account for those pieces that you need sooner, that you don't have the money for, and the things that you see that are, you know, 5 years and out, you start funding those, you know, when you, religiously.
and I think that's, you know, I guess that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't know how you articulate that and put it out there as a
Well,
recommendation.
you're talking
but-
about a flat budget, but like, what are you guys thinking?
I really didn't look at the mill numbers, I'm just looking to trim fat, whatever the mill comes out is what I think.
Gary, what does a 1 million, 350?
About it.
Right now, if we do the generator and we fix the grader, we're this close to like a 3/4 mil, 1 mil decrease. We're not quite there, cause we'd have to take feasibility money and, you know, but if we did a 1/2 mil, then you can put money toward the capital. It just all depends of, you know, and Dan had asked us in a board meeting, like, where we all wanna be and how are we gonna, and I, for the life of me, couldn't answer that, because I was so afraid if I said, oh, well, I wanna see 1 mil decrease, and I wanna see 2 mil, and then we failed, cause I
So-
didn't know, but, like, as it stands right now, fixing the grader even, am I misspeaking here, or that's kind of where we're at, right?
Hmm.
We're looking at a decrease even if we, fix the grader and the generator, but we still need to,
Start putting some money away
we
for
have,
other.
yeah, I mean, we have,
And so I
cause
think
this
if
is gonna
you,
hit us next
I
year.
think if you ask
harder,
somebody
you
what
know?
kind of mill decrease you're looking, you're already setting expectation that you feel you're gonna save money somewhere.
Well, that's it, and
I don't
we
think there's
can't-
anybody here that's gonna sit there and argue and tell you that
Just-
there's all kinds of
we
money to be
can't,
saved
like,
here.
we
Just on
almost-
its face, right now, if you're gonna start looking at funding reserves, like in a perfect world, like, we're gonna do
Of
this.
course, we're not in a perfect world, we have COVID, come on.
Okay,
Work
so
with us.
we're nowhere's where we need to be with capitals. We should be putting, Little Town of Senegat was putting $90,000 a year in capital reserves for 16 different reserve accounts.
And we have no savings account.
And they had a greater, they were still funding reserves for the greater. So, that's what we need to get back to. But, it's that, where do we start in that, what is gonna happen is.
And so, and that's why I'm saying, if you're asking me if I'm looking for a budget decrease or increase, or, I don't know what it's gonna be, I'm just looking for a stable budget.
Yeah,
I can't tell you that, am I gonna sit here and tell you I don't want my mill rate to go down by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mil? Hell no. I want it to go down 10, I don't.
That was rapid
Who's-
fire right there, you gotta slow that shit down.
Well, who's gonna say no to that, right? That's
Yeah,
a
that's right.
really ridiculous question to ask somebody. But I think the real answer is, do you wanna stabilize it starting this year? Or do you wanna drop by 2, 3 mils or 1 mil, and then next year shoot up,
yeah, it's gonna go
shoot
right
back up a mil and a half
back up
because you
again.
didn't address it here?
Mhm.
I think,
But,
I think
a mill increase is always an eye opener. If it decreases a little bit, those holiday season, it won't be such a big deal, even if it's, not 2%.
I would
2 mil
struggle
or-
if we were facing a increase in the mill rate, I would really struggle with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But I think if we can at least maintain or come down a little bit, I think, I'm okay with it. I'm not saying that is the best case scenario that, in my perfect world, that I would want. But I think given the situation that we're in, if you don't address it now, you're gonna address it later. One way or the other, this is coming. So,
Yeah, it's like going on vacation when you move at your house, it's
So-
like,
you
So-
just
I
can't
mean-
plan it all.
Let's talk a little bit about how we got here, okay? Started in 2016, 2015 actually, and the board started funding capitals. They started funding, like things that we needed to do now, okay? But sometimes it was coming out of the surplus, and so withdrawals from the surplus, okay,
Hold
over the
on.
course of, not only for reserves, not only for funding capital projects, not reserves, okay?
twice for reducing the mill rate.
Twice for reducing the mill rate, okay?
Which
And then-
doesn't
and then
help
we
us
got
out.
wiped out by the abatement of the mill.
Yeah.
So, the board was trying to, but they were always scared of increasing the mill rate. So what did they do? They went to where, well,
Easiest money.
can't do that no more, So now, this is what happens, and here we are. Nobody here nobody denies that we need to fund capital.
Said it
We need to
before,
fund-
I still think there's some departments out there that are underfunded. So,
So-
I can tell you for me, sitting through this process has been, when I first looked at the budgets, when they said, hey, you wanna be on the finance committee, sure, send me what you got, and I'm looking at that, are you kidding me, trim this, do that, cut that? You look at that from an ordinary person's standpoint, and there's all kinds of money to be saved. But the reality of it is, when you start digging into it and you're looking at where it's all going, it's not so easy.
It's not easy to make cuts.
So it's not.
It's not fun.
One good thing that I think you're seeing is, there's nobody saying, outright, let's trim staffing levels all over and cut benefits or none of that, you know, we're looking to do what's right. For me, I'm okay with the budgets the way we are, my biggest concern is that grader, our fire department, you know, if that's our, I guess for lack of a better term, a fallout shelter, something, you know, catastrophic Mother Nature event happens here where we have this blizzard and we're knocked out power for 3 weeks in northern Maine and our community is left for us. How do you answer those questions?
Yeah.
We didn't even have a we didn't have a transfer switch, are you kidding me, guys?
Yeah.
So, you know, look at, this 2020, there's been a lot that's going on this year, you never know what's gonna happen there next month, so.
You're gonna jinx us.
I think you said it well when you said, we gotta get to where we're going and we gotta do it safely. It's not a lot of fat here, I don't think. It's really a matter of robbing Peter to pay Paul at this point and try to maintain what we have. That's what I'm seeing.
Peter's
No.
loaded.
No.
Peter's loaded.
At the risk of getting, at the risk of getting shot and upsetting a lot of people, I'm gonna say what I'm thinking, and sometimes I've taken back stuff that I've said, and, you know, I've come out with things that, you know, cause I was upset about a number and I didn't understand, and I could be wrong, but how I understand the abatement and how that hit, and the taxes, and the town is basically split into two huge budgets, right? There's school and not huge, I mean, the school budget's not huge in town, but it's two bigger budgets with all these things underneath. The town is swallowing the county increase, the VRF increase, the, what other increase, and the abatement. The town departments, fire, public works, are swallowing all of that, and the
Significant
town's
amount.
savings swallowed all of that. So you're looking at basically half of the puzzle, or half of the piece, swallowing the whole, and what makes me say this is just to say to you, you're right, there's no fat to trim. I mean, we could definitely eliminate community development person, but
Where's it gonna get us in the long
then the
run?
projects that we are working on and the improvements that we're trying to make aren't gonna happen. And, you know, we could eliminate the assessor, but it just,
But there might be a time where we're gonna have to make those cuts.
well, and
It's coming, you know what I mean?
I think
it's
having
coming.
a list of things that are big things that we really need to look at as a community are very important, and those are things that are huge projects that, you know, a few of us can tackle at a time and say, you know, what do we want this community to look like in 2 years from now? And by no means am I'm picking at the school. I know, you know, people, they do what they need to do, and maybe the education might have to look a little different. Maybe the library might have to be moved elsewhere, who knows? But we aren't going to tackle those things and those
Sitting
big
here.
changes that will make significant impact for our taxpayer here.
Not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. Because, I mean, we can cut $500 here and $200 from pause, and we're not gonna find, the money, and then the minute someone's house burns down, holy cow, like, we're so screwed, or a blizzard, or whatever. So, the town side has swallowed, all of these things and increases and all of that stuff, so, I mean, you guys see it, from the first budget we started to this one, they've trimmed
A lot.
a lot.
And swallowed a lot
A
on top
lot,
of it.
so,
It's impressive.
there's been a lot of, there have been some big cuts
And I've
here.
choked a few times,
Huh?
It's impressive.
and I've choked a few times.
Yeah, and every time one of us goes in there and starts to question you.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
You've brought forth some cuts that we didn't ask for, that you just said, oh, you know, this is something I think we should look at, so, you know, it's been a pretty good conversation all the way around. But yeah, it would be nice to say we're gonna cut a mill, 2 mills, 3 mills, but
Who's
My,
gonna
my
say no?
my biggest wish list concern is the reserve accounts and
yeah,
being more structured and disciplined and having more of a system in place to fund those. And I think that when you you have to start somewhere. Because when you look at your budget and you've got history there, and you're like, okay, well, that makes sense, that seems to be working, and now we're not there. But, you know, coming from where I came from, there was a system in place, and when I got there, I was like, wow. And it was very easy to pass that, because, you know, you needed a piece of equipment over there, you had the money to do
I
it.
understand that, but we're kind of more stretched out here. I mean, it's harder to fund all that when you've got a lot going on, you know?
Yeah, but still, I mean, you still can't take away from the fact that a little community had 16 reserve accounts. Anything from computer upgrades to the plow trucks,
Yeah.
to the grader, to the payloaders, to
Yeah.
paving, to, my God.
But did they have the stuff that we have, you know what I mean? You gotta think of ambulance service and the fire department.
Well, I think it's just a bigger
The
scale.
sizes.
No,
I think you're just
proportionately.
proportionate, right, I think if you look at, you know, scale that to here, and we're not there yet, is what you're saying. And
No, but what I'm saying is, while we're paying $400 or $500,000
No,
for
they
rent,
don't
we're
have to
paying
fund a
it.
PD, and they don't
You
have
know
to
what I
fund
mean?
that.
Mm.
But,
Got a lot going on.
but they're, you know, $1 million budget, you know, so.
Yeah,
It's a different, whole different.
Huge.
Yeah, it's smaller.
And
Okay.
But I had a gentleman say to me this week, he said, you know, why, and he was questioning the school budget in particular, and it's funny how people look at things, because you know, he was like, oh, that, and they need to cut that, and we need to, and I'm like, okay, so do you have children? And he had 3 children graduate from here, that because, like, this system educated his children at one time.
Right.
And after I talked to him and said, well, yeah, and they educated your children, and then you said this one's in college, and he's off doing this, and wow, and he was like, yeah, I guess you're right, and it just turned into, you know, a whole, I think once you see this stuff, you know
well,
it, you
even,
get it.
you know, even,
I mean,
So I'm not picking on the school, I
No,
wanna
no.
make that a point, I just wanted to say, like,
even the school budget
you
came
guys
out
swallowed
with
half,
no increase,
with no
right?
increase.
And so, even the school budget, when I sat to that, and I wasn't privy to all those meetings, I went to the last couple to try to get that done. There's a lot in every budget that, as a regular taxpayer, if you
You don't
don't
know.
go out and get yourself the information that you need, it's easy to judge based off what you're looking at or what you're hearing on the street.
well, look how much time well, you just said, you spent a lot of time here learning.
Try to absorb this, you know, and you try to understand how this works in the end, and, you know, and I didn't understand that anything, I knew that if unspent money went into the undesignated fund and the undesignated fund was there, what you don't know is that there's a certain level that should be at, and then it's been depleted, and the more you cut this, the less you're putting in there. On top of having no capital expense accounts for half the budgets around here, you know, and you got fire departments that are failing, and you got these things that are failing in public works. You can't just keep cutting and sustain what you have. We're not even sustainable with what we have.
Right.
If you were to cut this budget and reduce it more today, next year, we're gonna have less equipment, less operators, less reliability, less, you know, essential services, they're going away. You can't maintain it. So I think that's important for
I
people
think,
to know.
and I think the nice thing about reserve accounts, they're less apt to be picked apart by the different board members and the processes, okay? It's there, and it looks like it works, and, you know, it makes good sense to do that. When you have a fleet like ours, and then all of a sudden you push everything back to the basically to the end of it, they're no good anymore, they're worthless. And then you're having to replace multiple pieces of equipment at once. I know Frenchville kept their 20-year-old plow trucks. 15 years for a plow truck is about as long as you want to keep them. They went to the bitter end with theirs, and they ended up buying 2 plow trucks within a year apart, and they financed both of those. Well, that's debt service that they incur, and now there's not even a rotation. They have 2 plow
Everything's
trucks,
gonna expire at the same time
right?
eventually.
And so you gotta think about the rotation and the you know, the turnover schedules for those pieces of equipment, so that you're not, and this is long-term stuff there.
That's not the small community you said was doing so good there, huh?
No, well, no, it's not to take, it's not that Frenchville did anything wrong, they used that equipment as long as they possibly
Exactly.
could. But,
Then it worked.
Then the consequences.
Then the consequences
then
hit you
hit-
later.
you know, and all of a sudden, yeah, so yes, it's nice, debt service is gonna fall off close together, and it'll be like, wow, you know, that's an expense we don't have to worry about for a while. But in the short term, that had an impact on the budget, and not necessarily great for the cycle them out of it, you know.
So in the capital purchase thing, capital purchases, are we gonna?
Yeah, how do you,
Well, this is the one where I, as a board member, I'm gonna ask that we put in the grader in here. Right, that's where it's gonna go.
that it goes in this one?
And it's not like we're gonna take money out of this department.
It's just,
It's basically that at the bottom of
Yeah.
this process, you have expenses and you have revenue.
put it in there somewhere.
And so we call that revenue, we bring it in, and it does what you want it to do.
So for capital purchases and reserves, that's what we're talking about right now.
Well, I mean, you guys, on your own, as a finance committee, you don't have to
But
do it, I'm just
I
saying.
understand it a little bit better, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think it needs to go in there. And what did you write for that part of it?
I started out with the generator auto switch at 40, the price. Present that to the board, then there's different options for the grader. Suggested at 200, well, taking money out of the ambulance reserve, Gary suggested 200,000 as a max, not to compromise next year's budget. And we talked a little bit about the sprinkler at the multi. Priorities are grader, fire department, roof. Then I think Gary mentioned something about the fire truck possibly being on a separate one.
Yeah, that would be.
We wouldn't have to address it on this
It's not
particular budget.
it's not anything that has fiscal note for
Okay,
this budget.
okay.
It's something that's going to have a fiscal note.
Okay,
We just have to realize it's coming, cause
Yeah,
we're gonna
right.
be doing this
Yeah,
again
correct.
soon.
Right,
so did I omit anything?
Sidewalk match, we're short, right?
I mean, if this finance committee wants to make a recommendation that we go out and get a fire truck, you guys can do that, you can say that as an aside here, it would be helpful.
It needs to go on a warrant.
Right, so that's what I was getting at. So for that additional, we need to get a new truck, correct?
Fire
That's-
truck?
Yes.
New tanker is,
So how do we address that with this? What helps
I would say that
the
it's not,
budget process?
I would say that it's not necessarily that it affects this budget, but if you wanna say that, you know, the finance committee recommends, replacement of a tanker truck.
That's what I was getting at. Do we just say recommend replacement of a fire truck, or
Yeah.
how do we, because I don't
But I mean,
know.
that's going to be it's going to be debt service, it's gonna be probably 5-year payment on that.
What are you gonna do otherwise, you know what I mean? Take it out of Ken's savings account.
Hope the house don't burn too
And
hot.
capital purchases, Gary, we're short on the sidewalk match.
So we're gonna have to, at some point, put more in there, we put 17.5 in there, but we've already spent engineering costs on that, so.
We don't know that, we don't have that amount.
So I mean, we're gonna have to either put some more in this year, and if you wanna say, let's double up on that 17.5, that would be fantastic. But whatever we don't cover for our match this year into that reserve, we're gonna have to put it all in next year.
Cause there's 19 in there now, and we needed 80, but you already spent some, so there's some service out there, there's some stuff out there that, and we don't have that number, right?
What are you referring to?
So, the match is 80,
The match is going to be, oh, I don't have that with me, but it's gonna be at least 80 there. It's going to be,
but we already spent some money, which
Yes.
is part of the match, I guess, I don't know that dollar value. I thought we were like $60,000 short, but we've spent some, so that's really not 60, it's probably maybe
Right.
40 or.
For the commitment side of it, cause we're committed to doing the portion of that, right?
Right.
I remember that
And so if we
conversation.
don't do something with it this time, it's gonna hit us next time. Double, like it'll hit us, it'll be a bigger number next time.
So on one of our last meetings, there was that feasibility study, got monies, you have that going somewhere already?
It's not here yet, but we've been talking about it,
Okay,
and to see whether or not the board wants to, you know, this committee and the budget, the board wants to repurpose that has to go to town meeting. Just like the taken from the ambulance department's reserve.
There's -30-26 is a health account, and there's a little minimal amount, and if the auditor finds that's correct, of 34 account, which is the 150th, that comes out to $27,000. Yeah, somewhere around $27,000 that I was gonna talk to Gary about and see if we can take that 27 and maybe transfer it to
Sidewalk.
wherever, the sidewalk or
whatever.
the groomer, the grader, or
And that was coming out of which one you said?
the
330?
feasibility study is the -30, it's
Yeah.
20,000.
Yeah.
The -26 health,
Yes, okay, that was your one you were talking about.
we're not 100% confident even what that is, I think, and it hasn't been used in years and years and years.
You had also made it, like, I might be misspeaking here. The 330-17, that deferred vacation reserve, that possibly was overfunded too a little bit right now, you had mentioned or something?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The
No.
deferred vacation reserve,
Those are funded there. We had those in the budget before, but in my budget, I took those out, cause we're adequately funded to cover
Okay.
those.
okay, so that's, okay.
Yeah, he's funded enough, not over.
Okay, that's what I was questioning, cause I remember, I didn't get it all, I had made a note on my sheet. And then there was some left over from the 150th reserve too, right?
$500.
Yeah, that's part of the whole
Slide that into the,
$27,000.
okay, I got that, that's
I
what I
was
was
like,
looking
let's
at.
clean these up and,
There we go.
take the money and put it
Put it
where we
to
need it,
somewhere where you
either
need
in the
it.
generator or the fire
Okay.
department or somewhere.
Okay.
So I don't have that page.
It's on the very,
It's
Okay.
these here, feasibility.
And that's where
okay.
that money's gonna come out.
Well, it's, yeah,
yeah. Recommendation, I guess.
yeah. And yeah, maybe or to the sidewalk mat or someplace that,
Is needed,
yeah, where we're gonna be short next time, 'cause
exactly. So are we done? Did we make it through everything?
if we all agree on the revenue side, there's nothing really we can do there.
No.
It's not a,
The only thing we really had, was to talk about the ambulance reserve, the revenue.
right,
We
that's
talked-
where that
We talked
is.
about that already.
And that's already in,
Everywhere else.
in here.
In that, right. That was interesting.
That was fun.
Not really, but. How much does this pay again?
Undesignated fund. It's empty.
So we have a meeting with the board of selectmen this Wednesday and Thursday, correct?
Thursday if we need it.
So Thursday is the standby day.
I am hopeful that we can get through this process on Wednesday, much like we did tonight, and
Be done with it?
not have to be meeting on Thursday.
That'd be excellent. It's been eye-opening,
Yeah, it has.
it's been interesting, for sure.
Motion to adjourn.
I'm just,
was either change the whole bylaws
Yeah.
or I do it.
yeah,
So I figured, well,
glad that's
Better
done.
off?
Yeah, that went better than I thought. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. How are you feeling about things?
a little different than some of the things that were mentioned. I
I don't wanna look at things as $500,000 sounds good, let's aim for that and see what we can do. I don't wanna look at a number and say, let's aim for that number.
Yeah, I just
I
wanted
wanna
to
say, let's
have
do
a-
everything we have to do, and whatever number comes at the end, I don't wanna be sitting there going, well, we still have $750,000, let's work it down a little more to $500,000. Like, I don't wanna focus on that, and I don't wanna say that I'm focusing on this number.
Right.
I just wanna say I'm focusing on reducing as much as